Hey guys, tonight we embark on an epic journey through one of the galaxy's most defining conflicts, the rise and fall of the First Order, and the brave souls of the Resistance who stood against overwhelming darkness when hope seemed nothing more than a dying ember. From secret bases hidden in jungle canopies to planet-killing superweapons that could snuff out entire star systems in mere moments, their story is one of sacrifice, legacy, and the eternal struggle between light and shadow. So, before you settle in for this galactic odyssey, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Get into your blanket and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In the depths of space, 30 years after the second Death Star's destruction, something stirred in the unknown regions where no Republic scout had ever returned. Ancient Imperial codes crackled through the void, transmitted by vessels that should not have existed. These were not the desperate transmissions of scattered remnants, but the coordinated signals of a vast armada built in shadow and secrecy. A young scavenger on a desert world would soon hold a lightsaber that called to her across the years. A former stormtrooper would make a choice that would shatter a lifetime of conditioning. And somewhere in the galaxy's darkest corners, a figure wrapped in shadow would whisper orders that would bring systems to their knees. But the galaxy had forgotten the lessons of history. Peace had made them soft, complacent. They believed the Empire's darkness had died with its emperor. They could not have been more wrong. For in the cold reaches beyond known space, something ancient had awakened, something that remembered every Sith Lord, every fallen Jedi, every world that had burned in the name of order. The First Order was merely its instrument, but the true puppet master remained hidden, patient, and utterly ruthless. The war that was coming would make the Clone Wars seem like a skirmish. It would tear families apart, destroy entire governments, and force the galaxy's heroes to make choices that would haunt them forever. This is the chronicle of that conflict, told as the survivors remember it, when the very concept of hope hung by the thinnest of threads. 30 standard years had passed since the Battle of Endor, and the galaxy wore peace like an unfamiliar garment. The New Republic's gleaming towers stretched toward cloudless skies on Hosnian Prime, their crystalline surfaces reflecting a prosperity that seemed almost too good to be true. Children who had never heard the shriek of TIE fighters played in parks where once only the brave dared to gather. Trade routes that had been choked by imperial blockades now hummed with merchant vessels carrying exotic goods between worlds that spoke freely for the first time in decades. You are among the few who remembered differently. As a galactic historian specializing in the Empire's final days, you have dedicated your life to documenting the scattered remnants of that dark era before they fade entirely from memory. Your quarters aboard the research vessel Chronicle are filled with recovered Imperial data cards, testimonies from former officers, and maps marking the last known positions of fled Star Destroyers. Most citizens prefer to forget those years of oppression, but you understand that history ignored becomes history repeated. Your closest companion in this work is Commander Nara Sos, a former rebel intelligence officer whose weathered face tells the story of countless covert missions behind enemy lines. She joined your research expedition not for academic curiosity, but because old habits die hard, and she still feels the phantom itch of unfinished business. The war officially ended at Jakku, she often reminds you, but wars rarely end cleanly in the real galaxy. The third member of your small team is Jorik Helm, a New Republic senator's aide, who secured funding for your expedition by convincing his superiors that documenting Imperial remnants was essential for preventing future conflicts. Young and idealistic, he believes deeply in the Republic's promise of lasting peace, though his enthusiasm sometimes blinds him to the darker currents you and Nara sense flowing beneath the galaxy's calm surface. Your investigation began 3 months ago, when monitoring stations in the Outer Rim detected encrypted transmissions using obsolete Imperial protocols. The New Republic Intelligence Service dismissed them as automated distress beacons from decades-old wreckage, but Nara recognized patterns that suggested coordinated communication. Someone was using the Empire's old codes, and they were using them with purpose. The deeper you dig, the more unsettling the picture becomes. Entire Imperial supply depots that should have been stripped bare years ago show signs of recent activity. Former weapons manufacturing facilities, supposedly decommissioned, have power signatures that suggest ongoing operations. Most disturbing of all, reports from independent traders speak of encounters with ships displaying no transponder codes, vessels that match the profiles of Imperial designs, but incorporate technology far more advanced than anything the Empire possessed at its height. The galaxy's leaders remain focused on the delicate work of governance, mediating disputes between member worlds and managing the complex transition from military occupation to civilian rule. They speak of demilitarization, of turning star destroyers into housing complexes and AT-AT walkers into mining equipment. The very idea that someone might be building new weapons of war seems not just unlikely but almost impossible to contemplate. Yet here you are, following a trail of evidence that grows colder with each passing day, racing against time to document something that the galaxy would prefer to pretend never existed. The unknown regions beckon like a siren song, those vast reaches of space where Imperial survey teams vanished without trace during the war's final years. If answers exist, they lie somewhere in that trackless void where hyperspace roots dead-end in gravitational anomalies and ancient stellar phenomena. The Chronicle's navigation computer shows your current position at the edge of known space, where the familiar blue lines of established hyperspace lanes fade into the red uncertainty of uncharted territory. Behind you lies a galaxy at peace. Ahead waits the darkness between stars and whatever secrets it has been hiding for 3 decades. The hyperspace jump into the unknown regions feels different from the moment you emerge from that tunnel of swirling energy. The stars here are older, their light carrying a weight that seems to press against the Chronicle's viewports like an ancient burden. Navigation becomes an art rather than a science, as your astromech droids struggle to plot courses through gravitational anomalies that defy conventional physics. These are the reaches where the Emperor's most trusted explorers vanished, where entire survey fleets simply stopped reporting back to Imperial Center. Commander Sauce stands at the tactical station, her experienced eyes scanning sensor readings that make little sense according to standard Imperial or Republic protocols. Space itself seems denser here, as if the very fabric of reality has been stretched and twisted by forces beyond comprehension. Her voice carries the caution of someone who has learned to trust instinct over instruments when she reports that the Chronicle's sensors are detecting metallic signatures that shouldn't exist in this empty region of space. The first discovery comes 18 hours into your journey, when passive sensors detect the skeletal remains of what was once an Imperial supply depot. The facility drifts dead in space, its hull breached in dozens of places, but the pattern of damage suggests systematic dismantling rather than battle destruction. Someone took this station apart piece by piece, salvaging everything of value before abandoning the stripped framework to the void. As the Chronicle approaches the derelict station, Jorik's enthusiasm for the expedition begins to waver. He had expected to find historical artifacts, and perhaps some insight into Imperial logistics, but the methodical way this facility was harvested speaks to something far more organized than simple scavenging. The station's computer core has been completely removed, along with every piece of equipment that might have contained useful data or technology. Your boarding party discovers that the station's identification codes have been carefully burned out of its hull plating, leaving only faint impressions that your computer can barely reconstruct. This was Imperial Depot, Oryx 7, established during the final years of the Empire as a forward supply base for deep space exploration missions. According to the incomplete records you managed to recover, its last official communication was received just weeks before the Battle of Endor. The depot's cargo holds tell a more disturbing story. Massive container bays that once held supplies for extended missions show clear evidence of having been systematically emptied, but the loading equipment remains in perfect working order. Whoever stripped this facility had all the time in the world and possessed the technical knowledge to maximize their salvage operations. They weren't desperate refugees fleeing the Empire's collapse, but organized professionals conducting a planned operation. Commander Sauce discovers something even more unsettling in the station's communication array. The equipment has been modified with components that don't match any Imperial or Republic specifications she's ever encountered. The technology appears to be Imperial in origin but represents advances that shouldn't have been possible with the Empire's known capabilities. Someone has been developing new communication systems using Imperial research as a foundation, and they've been doing it in secret for decades. Your investigation leads deeper into the station's administrative sections, where you find evidence of the depot's final months of operation. Personal logs from the facility's commander speak of supply runs to coordinates that don't appear on any official Imperial charts. Equipment requisitions mention projects with code names that don't match any known Imperial programs. Most intriguingly, references to the contingency appear repeatedly in the later entries, always in contexts that suggest knowledge of some vast backup plan that the Emperor had prepared for the Empire's potential defeat. The trail grows warmer when you discover a hidden compartment in the commander's quarters, containing a collection of Sith wayfinders, ancient navigational devices that the Empire had been studying for their ability to plot courses through the unknown region's dangerous hyperspace anomalies. These artifacts, relics of the dark side's power, had been used to guide exploration missions into areas where conventional navigation failed. The fact that they were left behind suggests that whoever emptied this station already possessed better navigational tools. As you prepare to leave the derelict depot, Jorik makes a discovery that changes everything. In the station's emergency shelter, he finds the personal log of Ensign Kare Teb, a young communications officer who had been assigned to monitor deep space transmissions. Her final entries, recorded in the chaotic weeks following news of the Emperor's death, describe receiving transmission after transmission from Imperial ships fleeing into the unknown regions. But these weren't random escape attempts by desperate survivors. The messages were coded, coordinated, and followed a pattern that suggested they were all following the same predetermined evacuation plan. The ensign's log reveals that she had been secretly copying and storing these transmissions, recognizing their historical importance even as her superiors ordered her to purge all communication records. Her hidden data cache contains fragments of conversations between Imperial officers who spoke of rendezvous coordinates, resource stockpiles, and timetables for something they called the Great Work. The transmissions paint a picture of a massive coordinated exodus that had been planned long before the Empire's public collapse. Most disturbing of all, the final transmission in the ensign's cache contains a brief message from a voice that Commander Sauce recognizes with a chill of recognition. It's the unmistakable tones of an Imperial Security Bureau operative, speaking in codes that she remembers from her days conducting intelligence operations against the Empire. The message is simple but chilling in its implications. Phase 1 complete, proceeding to terminus coordinates. The contingency is now active. As the Chronicle departs the empty depot, you and your team struggle to process the implications of what you've discovered. The Empire's collapse wasn't the chaotic disintegration that the galaxy had witnessed, but merely the public face of a much larger strategic withdrawal. Somewhere in the unknown regions, Imperial forces had been regrouping, rebuilding, and preparing for something that their scattered communications referred to as the return. The question that haunts your thoughts as you push deeper into uncharted space is whether you're investigating the Empire's final chapter or the opening moves of something far more dangerous. The stars ahead offer no answers, only the promise of more questions and the growing certainty that the galaxy's peace has been built on a foundation far more fragile than anyone imagined. Behind you, the New Republic continues its hopeful work of healing the wounds of war, unaware that the enemy they thought they had defeated was merely regrouping for a conflict that would dwarf anything the galaxy had previously endured. Following the transmission trails deeper into the unknown regions, your team discovers something that defies every assumption about the Empire's supposed destruction. Massive construction sites hidden within asteroid fields reveal the birth of a military machine that surpasses even the Empire's greatest achievements. These facilities aren't the desperate hideouts of Imperial remnants, but sophisticated industrial complexes that have been operating at full capacity for decades, producing weapons and ships using technology that represents quantum leaps beyond anything the Empire possessed at its height. The first facility you encounter is a shipyard complex built within a hollowed-out asteroid, its interior bays large enough to accommodate vessels of unprecedented size. The construction techniques are unmistakably Imperial in their precision and attention to detail, but the ships taking shape in these bays represent evolution rather than mere continuation. Star destroyers that dwarf their predecessors grow from skeletal frameworks, their hulls incorporating design improvements that address every weakness the rebellion had exploited during the Galactic Civil War. Commander Sauce's tactical analysis reveals innovations that should have taken generations to develop, energy systems that provide power outputs exceeding Imperial specifications by orders of magnitude, defensive systems that learn and adapt to incoming attacks, weapons arrays that can target multiple capital ships simultaneously with precision that would have been impossible using Imperial-era technology. These advances represent not just incremental improvement but fundamental breakthroughs in military engineering. The workforce constructing these vessels presents an even more disturbing revelation. These aren't conscripted laborers or desperate Imperial loyalists, but individuals who have been raised from childhood for this purpose. Their uniforms bear the insignia of an organization calling itself the First Order, and their behavior displays the kind of absolute dedication that can only be achieved through systematic indoctrination from birth. They work with the efficiency of machines, speaking only when necessary, and displaying no curiosity about anything beyond their assigned tasks. Your infiltration of the facility's computer networks reveals an organizational structure that combines the Empire's authoritarian efficiency with innovations that address every factor that contributed to the Emperor's downfall. The First Order has eliminated the political infighting that weakened the Empire by creating a pure military hierarchy with absolute loyalty to a supreme leader whose identity remains carefully concealed. Decision-making authority flows through clearly defined chains of command, but individual initiative is encouraged within strict parameters, creating a system that maintains control while avoiding the rigid thinking that often hampered Imperial operations. The scope of the First Order's resources becomes apparent as your investigation reveals the existence of dozens of similar facilities throughout the unknown regions. Mining operations strip entire worlds of useful materials. Manufacturing complexes produce everything from basic components to exotic technologies. Training facilities indoctrinate new generations of soldiers, officers, and technicians. The organization has created a completely self-sufficient military-industrial complex that operates independently of any external supply lines or support networks. Most impressive and terrifying is the evidence of their crown achievement, a project they refer to simply as Starkiller. Construction records indicate the conversion of an entire planet into a weapon system that makes the Death Star seem primitive by comparison. Rather than using conventional reactor technology, this weapon draws power directly from stars, accumulating and focusing stellar energy into a beam capable of destroying not just individual worlds but entire star systems from across the galaxy. The technological sophistication required for such a project represents advances in multiple fields that the Empire's scientists had only theorized about. The engineering challenges of boring through a planet's core while maintaining structural integrity. The energy management systems needed to contain and direct stellar power. The targeting mechanisms capable of achieving accuracy across interstellar distances. Each element represents breakthroughs that should have required decades of research and development. Jorik's analysis of the facility's personnel records reveals the human cost of the First Order's achievements. Children identified as having useful aptitudes are separated from their families and raised in training facilities that strip away every trace of individual identity. They are given numerical designations instead of names, educated to view absolute obedience as the highest virtue, and trained to perform their assigned functions with mechanical precision. Those who show signs of independent thinking or emotional attachment are subjected to reconditioning procedures that eliminate such weaknesses. The First Order's recruitment extends beyond simple kidnapping, incorporating systematic programs that identify and acquire force-sensitive children throughout the unknown regions. These individuals receive training that combines dark side techniques with imperial doctrine, creating warriors who possess both supernatural abilities and unwavering loyalty to the organization's goals. The training programs are overseen by figures whose identities remain hidden, but whose methods bear the unmistakable influence of Sith philosophy. Perhaps most disturbing is the evidence that the First Order's rise was not an accidental development, but the culmination of a plan that had been generations in the making. References to the contingency appear throughout their operational documents, always in contexts that suggest knowledge of the Empire's eventual defeat and preparation for what would come afterward. The Emperor's final orders, transmitted in the chaos of his death, had set in motion a sequence of events designed to ensure that Imperial ideology would survive even the Empire's destruction and return stronger than ever. As you conclude your investigation of this first major facility, the scope of the threat becomes clear. The First Order represents not just a continuation of Imperial ambitions, but their perfection. They have learned from every mistake the Empire made, addressed every weakness the rebellion exploited, and developed capabilities that exceed anything the galaxy has previously encountered. They have been preparing for decades for a war that the New Republic doesn't even know is coming, and their first strike will be devastating beyond imagination. The question that haunts your team as you prepare to delve deeper into the First Order's network of facilities is not whether they will emerge from the unknown regions, but when and how the galaxy will survive their return. The evidence suggests that their emergence is imminent and that their first actions will be designed to cripple any organized resistance before it can form. The peaceful galaxy that has existed for 30 years is about to discover that the Empire's defeat was merely the end of the first act in a much longer and more terrible story. While your investigation continues in the unknown regions, the New Republic's capital buzzes with the comfortable routine of peacetime governance. In the grand chambers of the Galactic Senate on Hosnian Prime, Senator Leia Organa rises to address her colleagues about intelligence reports that few of them want to hear. Her voice carries the authority of someone who has seen war's true face, but the senators around her shift uncomfortably in their seats, their attention already drifting toward more pleasant matters of trade agreements and cultural exchanges. The reports Leia presents paint a disturbing picture of Imperial remnants consolidating power in the galaxy's unexplored regions, but her colleagues dismiss these concerns with the casual confidence of those who have never faced a truly existential threat. They speak of war wariness, of the need to focus on healing rather than fighting, of the impossibility of any significant Imperial resurgence after such a complete defeat. Their arguments sound reasonable, logical, and utterly divorced from the reality that Leia senses through her connection to the Force. In the quiet moments between legislative sessions, Leia retreats to her private offices overlooking Hosnian Prime's glittering cityscape. The towers stretch toward the sky like monuments to civilization's triumph over chaos, their lights twinkling with the promise of peaceful prosperity. But Leia's eyes see beyond the surface beauty to the fragility beneath, the dangerous complacency that has settled over a galaxy that believes its greatest challenges lie in the past. Her desk holds intelligence briefings that paint an increasingly alarming picture. Independent traders report encounters with unidentified ships using Imperial designs, but incorporating unknown technologies. Outer Rim colonies describe mysterious disappearances of individuals with technical skills or force sensitivity. Most disturbing of all, intercepted communications suggest coordinated activities by groups using obsolete Imperial codes that should have died with the Empire itself. The New Republic Intelligence Service, decimated by post-war budget cuts and organizational restructuring, lacks the resources to investigate these reports thoroughly. Their analysts, most of whom have never experienced the Empire's methodical efficiency, interpret the scattered evidence as the random activities of desperate remnants rather than signs of organized planning. They produce reports that minimize threats, emphasize the impossibility of Imperial resurgence, and recommend continued focus on domestic reconstruction rather than external security concerns. Leia's attempts to secure funding for expanded intelligence operations encounter resistance from senators who view such proposals as warmongering. They remind her that the galaxy has already sacrificed too much to warfare, that the New Republic's strength lies in its commitment to peace rather than its military capabilities. Her reputation as a former rebel leader actually works against her in these discussions, as colleagues dismiss her concerns as the paranoid reflexes of someone who cannot adapt to peacetime realities. The personal cost of her vigilance weighs heavily on her relationship with Han Solo, whose own response to peace has been to retreat into the familiar comforts of smuggling and adventure. Their conversations about the future often end in arguments about whether the galaxy's problems require military solutions or can be addressed through diplomacy and economic development. Han wants to enjoy the peace they fought so hard to achieve, while Leia cannot shake the feeling that their victory was merely the end of one battle in a much longer war. Her connection to the Force provides insights that she cannot share with skeptical colleagues or quantify in intelligence reports. Through meditation, she senses currents of darkness gathering strength in the galaxy's hidden corners, ancient malevolence that has not been destroyed but merely driven into deeper shadows. The Emperor's death created a vacuum that something else is moving to fill, and that something possesses both the patience and the resources to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Most painful of all is her growing awareness of the darkness touching her own son, Ben Solo, who has been training with his uncle Luke, but shows disturbing signs of instability and anger. Through their family bond, she senses his struggle with the conflicting influences of light and dark, his fascination with his grandfather's legacy, and his growing resentment toward the expectations placed upon him as the son of heroes. Her attempts to reach out to him encounter walls of adolescent rebellion, complicated by supernatural power and the burden of a legendary bloodline. The Force shows her glimpses of possible futures, visions too fragmentary to provide clear guidance, but consistent enough to confirm her worst fears. She sees worlds burning under weapons more terrible than anything the Empire possessed. She witnesses the rise of a new generation of dark side warriors who combine ancient Sith techniques with modern military doctrine. Most terrifyingly, she perceives the corruption of someone she loves, a fall to darkness that will echo through the galaxy like a curse upon her family's legacy. These visions drive her to make a decision that will define the galaxy's response to the coming crisis. If the New Republic will not act on incomplete intelligence and undefined threats, she will create an organization that can operate independently of political oversight and bureaucratic inertia. The resistance will be her answer to the First Order, a network of dedicated individuals who understand that eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. Her initial recruitment efforts focus on veterans of the rebellion who share her concerns about emerging threats. These men and women have seen how quickly peace can collapse when evil organizes itself, and they retain the skills and determination necessary to fight another war if necessary. They agree to serve not because they seek glory or adventure, but because they understand that someone must be prepared to defend the galaxy when its elected leaders cannot or will not act. As Leia begins the delicate work of building a resistance movement within a republic that sees no need for resistance, she reflects on the irony of her situation. She fought to establish a government that would make organizations like hers unnecessary, but that very government's success has created the conditions that make her resistance essential. The galaxy's peace depends on people who remain prepared for war, and she has accepted the burden of ensuring that such people will be ready when the darkness returns. Deep in the jungle canopies of Dakar, where ancient Masasi temples rise like forgotten monuments to civilizations lost to time, General Leia Organa stands before a gathering of individuals who represent the galaxy's last hope against a threat that most refuse to acknowledge. The humid air carries the sounds of exotic birds and the distant hum of X-wing engines as pilots conduct training exercises through the forest's natural obstacles. This hidden base, established in defiance of New Republic policy, serves as the birthplace of an organization that will soon be tested beyond all measure. The men and women assembled in the temple's stone chambers represent the finest examples of military excellence and moral courage that the galaxy can produce. Veterans of the rebellion sit alongside younger recruits who have never known war but possess the instincts to recognize approaching danger. Former Imperial officers who saw through their government's lies stand with Republic intelligence operatives frustrated by their superiors' complacency. They share little in common except their understanding that someone must be prepared to fight for the galaxy's freedom when its elected leaders cannot or will not act. Commander Poe Dameron embodies the spirit that defines this new resistance. The young pilot's record speaks of extraordinary skill and courage, but also of a troubling tendency toward reckless heroism that sometimes endangers his missions and his wingmates. His approach to combat combines innovative tactics with split-second improvisation, making him both invaluable as a strike leader and impossible to predict as a subordinate. Leia sees in him the kind of inspired leadership that the Resistance will need, tempered by the hard-won wisdom that comes from surviving impossible odds. The base itself reflects the Resistance's approach to warfare, combining sophisticated technology with adaptive improvisation. Concealed landing bays house starfighters that have been modified beyond manufacturer specifications, their systems enhanced with improvements born from necessity and implemented by mechanics who learned their trade keeping rebel ships operational during the darkest days of the Empire. Communications arrays hidden within the jungle canopy maintain contact with sympathetic sources throughout the galaxy, creating an intelligence network that operates independently of official channels. Admiral Akbar brings to the Resistance the strategic thinking that helped defeat the Empire's fleet at Endor, but his tactical assessments paint a disturbing picture of the challenges ahead. The fragmentary intelligence reaching Dakar suggests that any future conflict will be fought on a scale that dwarfs the galactic civil war. The enemy appears to possess resources that exceed anything the Empire commanded at its height, along with technological advantages that could render conventional Republic defenses obsolete. Victory will require not just courage and skill, but adaptability and innovation that pushes military thinking beyond established doctrine. The recruitment process reveals the depth of concern that exists beneath the New Republic's peaceful facade. Intelligence operatives provide reports of systematic kidnappings targeting individuals with technical skills or force sensitivity. Merchant captains describe encounters with ships that match no known designs but display imperial insignia modified with unfamiliar symbols. Most troubling of all, several former Imperial officers who attempted to warn Republic authorities about organized remnant activities have simply disappeared, their fates unknown, but their silence ominous. Dr. Colonia brings medical expertise to the growing organization, but her background in trauma treatment reflects the Resistance leadership's understanding that this conflict will exact a terrible human cost. Her establishment of field hospitals and emergency treatment protocols suggests preparation for casualties on a massive scale. The medical supplies she requisitions include treatments for exotic weapons effects and psychological trauma, indicating expectations that go far beyond conventional warfare. The Resistance's intelligence operations uncover disturbing patterns in the galaxy's economic and political landscape. Key industrial facilities report mysterious equipment failures that require replacement parts available only from sources in the unknown regions. Political figures who advocate for increased military preparedness face scandals that destroy their credibility with suspicious timing. Most significantly, several New Republic intelligence operatives who investigated Imperial remnant activities have been transferred to harmless positions or retired early, their expertise removed from active service at the moment when it is most needed. Captain Typho coordinates security for the growing organization, implementing protocols that assume infiltration attempts by an enemy possessing intimate knowledge of Republic procedures and Resistance personnel. His paranoia proves justified when several potential recruits are revealed to be intelligence operatives working for unknown masters. The sophisticated nature of these infiltration attempts suggests an enemy with resources and patience that exceed anything the scattered Imperial remnants should possess. The Resistance's financial structure operates through a network of private donors and sympathetic corporations that share Leia's concerns about emerging threats. These funding sources must remain completely hidden from New Republic oversight, as the organization's very existence contradicts official policy regarding post-war demilitarization. The delicate balance between operational security and resource acquisition requires constant attention, as any exposure could result in political scandal that would destroy the Resistance before it can prove its necessity. Training exercises conducted in Dakar's jungle environment prepare Resistance personnel for unconventional warfare against an enemy that possesses overwhelming advantages in resources and technology. These scenarios emphasize mobility, improvisation, and the kind of asymmetric tactics that allowed the rebellion to defeat the Empire despite massive disadvantages. However, the tactical situations being practiced suggest expectations of fighting a much more sophisticated and adaptive enemy than the rigid Imperial military machine. The establishment of safe houses and supply depots throughout the galaxy creates a network that can support extended operations even if the main base is compromised. These hidden facilities, staffed by volunteers who risk their lives for a cause that most of their neighbors cannot understand, represent the kind of grassroots support that sustained the rebellion during its darkest hours. Their existence provides hope that the galaxy's people will rally to defend their freedom when the true nature of the threat becomes apparent. As the Resistance takes shape in the shadows of Dogar's ancient temples, Leia reflects on the tragic irony of her situation. She fought to create a government that would make organizations like hers unnecessary, but that government's very success has created the conditions that make resistance essential. The peace she helped establish depends on the willingness of a few dedicated individuals to remain prepared for war, and she has accepted the burden of ensuring that such preparation will be sufficient when darkness returns to challenge the light. On the remote ocean world of Ashtu, where the galaxy's first Jedi temple stands as a monument to ancient wisdom and forgotten hope, Luke Skywalker has chosen exile over action, solitude over the burden of leadership that once defined his life. The island's weathered stone structures rise from seas that have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, their surfaces worn smooth by millennia of salt spray and the patient work of time itself. Here, surrounded by the endless rhythm of waves against stone, the last Jedi grapples with failures that have shattered his faith in everything he once believed about the Force and his own destiny. The temple's ancient chambers hold secrets that span thousands of years, sacred texts written by the first beings to discover the Force's power and the terrible responsibility that comes with wielding it. These books, preserved through eras of war and peace, contain wisdom that could guide a new generation of Jedi Knights. But Luke finds himself unable to read them without confronting the magnitude of his own mistakes. Every page speaks of balance, of the delicate relationship between light and dark, and of the constant vigilance required to prevent the corruption of good intentions. The island's native porgs provide the only companionship Luke allows himself, their simple presence, a reminder of life untouched by the galaxy's greater conflicts. These creatures, evolved to thrive in Arch 2's harsh maritime environment, display a resilience and adaptability that Luke envies. They face each day's challenges without the weight of destiny or the burden of supernatural power, finding joy in simple survival and the company of their kind. Their cheerful calls echo across the island's rocky surfaces, a counterpoint to the silence that Luke has wrapped around himself like armor. The destruction of his Jedi Academy haunts every moment of Luke's solitude. He had gathered Force-sensitive children from across the galaxy, believing that he could rebuild the Jedi Order without repeating the mistakes that led to its previous destruction. His training methods combined traditional Jedi techniques with insights gained from his own unconventional path to mastery, emphasizing emotional balance rather than detachment, connection rather than isolation. For years it seemed that his approach was succeeding, producing students who possessed both power and wisdom. Ben Solo's fall to the dark side represents not just the loss of a student, but the failure of everything Luke believed about redemption and the power of love to overcome darkness. The boy who should have embodied the Skywalker legacy instead became its corruption, turning the gifts Luke had nurtured into weapons against everything the Jedi represented. The moment when Luke ignited his lightsaber in Ben's sleeping quarters, overwhelmed by visions of the darkness growing within his nephew, remains the defining failure of his life. That instant of fear and anger created the very monster he had hoped to prevent. The other students' deaths weigh on Luke's conscience with a gravity that threatens to crush his spirit. Young men and women who had trusted him with their lives and their futures died because of his failure to recognize and address the corruption growing within their ranks. Some died fighting Ben Solo and the Knights of Ren, others perished when the Academy burned, and still others simply vanished, their fates unknown but their loss equally devastating. Each name represents a future that will never be realized, a light that was extinguished because of his inadequacy as a teacher and guardian. The Force itself seems different to Luke in his exile, its familiar presence now colored by doubt and recrimination, where once he felt guidance and strength flowing through his connection to the cosmic energy. Now he perceives only the endless cycle of conflict that his intervention seems destined to perpetuate. The dark side's corruption of his nephew demonstrates that even the purest intentions can lead to catastrophic consequences, that the very act of training Force users might inevitably create the conditions for their fall to darkness. His daily routine on Arc 2 reflects his rejection of the heroic role that the galaxy expects him to play. He spends his mornings fishing in the island's treacherous waters, using simple nets and traditional techniques rather than relying on the Force to enhance his efforts. The physical challenge of surviving in this harsh environment provides a form of meditation, grounding him in immediate realities rather than cosmic abstractions. The fish he catches sustain his body, while the effort required to catch them occupies his mind with concrete problems that have achievable solutions. The ancient Jedi texts speak of similar periods in the Order's history, times when individual masters withdrew from galactic affairs to contemplate the nature of the Force and their own relationship to its power. These accounts provide little comfort, as they inevitably describe the return of such hermits to active involvement in galactic conflicts. The pattern suggests that exile is merely preparation for greater trials, that the Force will not allow its servants to abandon their responsibilities permanently. Luke's connection to Leia across the vastness of space carries echoes of her growing desperation and the mounting threats that she perceives through her own sensitivity to the Force. Their bond, forged by blood and strengthened by shared trials, allows him to sense her fear for the galaxy's future and her need for his support. Yet he cannot bring himself to leave Arch-2, convinced that his intervention would only make the situation worse. The last Jedi has become a prisoner of his own failures, unable to act and unable to truly withdraw from the conflicts that continue to shape the galaxy's destiny. The island's tides bring debris from distant worlds, fragments of ships and artifacts that speak of ongoing conflicts beyond Arch-2's isolated shores. These reminders of the galaxy's troubles serve as constant challenges to Luke's chosen isolation, physical evidence that his withdrawal from galactic affairs has not ended the need for heroes. Sometimes he finds himself studying these pieces of wreckage, using the Force to sense their origins and the stories they might tell, before forcing himself to cast them back into the sea. The temple's highest tower provides a vantage point from which Luke can observe the island's surroundings and the endless expanse of ocean that separates him from the rest of the galaxy. From this position, he sometimes allows himself to extend his awareness through the Force, touching the minds of beings across vast distances and sensing the currents of conflict that continue to shape galactic events. These moments of connection inevitably end in renewed determination to maintain his isolation, as the galaxy's pain only reinforces his belief that his involvement would cause more harm than good. In the deepest chambers of your investigation, where the First Order's most guarded secrets lie buried beneath layers of encryption and misdirection, you discover evidence of a presence that predates the Empire itself. The being known as Supreme Leader Snoke emerges from the shadows of history not as a recent addition to the galactic stage, but as an ancient entity whose influence has shaped events for millennia. His true nature defies every assumption about the dark side's limitations and the natural lifespan of Force users, suggesting powers that transcend the boundaries of mortality itself. The earliest references to Snoke appear in fragmentary records recovered from Old Republic archives, documents that describe encounters with a figure matching his description during conflicts that predate the Clone Wars by centuries. These accounts, dismissed by Imperial scholars as myth or misidentification, now take on terrifying significance as your investigation reveals the consistency of witness testimony across vast spans of time. The being described in these ancient texts possesses the same physical characteristics, the same tactical preferences, and the same supernatural abilities that define the First Order's current leader. Archaeological evidence from worlds throughout the unknown regions supports the historical accounts, revealing artifacts and structures that bear Snoke's distinctive influence. Temple complexes on forgotten worlds display architectural styles that incorporate elements from dozens of different civilizations, suggesting a being who has observed and influenced the development of multiple species across galactic history. The dark side emanations from these sites remain so powerful that they can be detected by sensitive instruments even after millennia of abandonment. Commander Sauce's analysis of First Order communications reveals patterns that suggest Snoke's involvement in galactic affairs extends far beyond his official emergence as Supreme Leader. Encrypted transmissions reference his guidance during key moments in the Empire's history, including strategic decisions that were attributed to Palpatine, but apparently originated from this more ancient source. The Emperor's own final orders make oblique references to the Wise One and the Ancient Teacher, terms that appear to describe Snoke's role as advisor and manipulator behind the scenes. The being's physical form presents perhaps the most disturbing aspect of his true nature. Medical scans conducted by First Order personnel describe injuries and deformities that should have proven fatal to any normal humanoid. Yet, Snoke continues to function with supernatural vitality. His scarred and twisted appearance suggests exposure to dark side energies over periods that exceed the natural lifespan of any known species. The implications are clear. Snoke has found ways to extend his existence beyond normal biological limits, preserving his consciousness and power through means that violate every natural law. Your investigation reveals that Snoke's recruitment of Ben Solo was not a random opportunity, but the culmination of a plan that began before the boy's birth. The ancient being had observed the Skywalker bloodline for generations, recognizing the unique potential that emerged from Anakin's connection to the Force and his descendants' capacity for both great good and terrible evil. Ben's conception and early development were monitored through intermediaries who reported his progress to their hidden master, setting the stage for his eventual corruption. The methods used to turn Ben Solo into Kylo Ren demonstrate Snoke's profound understanding of psychological manipulation and dark side indoctrination. Rather than relying on the crude techniques favored by the Sith, Snoke employed subtlety and patience, slowly corrupting his target through careful exposure to selected truths and calculated deceptions. The boy's natural anger and resentment were nurtured through seemingly accidental encounters with information about his grandfather's legacy, while his trust in his family was systematically undermined through revelations about secrets they had kept from him. The transformation of Ben Solo represents more than simple recruitment. It demonstrates Snoke's ability to create dark-side warriors who surpass their Sith predecessors in both power and dedication. Kylo Ren possesses abilities that combine traditional lightsaber combat with innovative Force techniques that reflect his master's ancient knowledge. His unstable fighting style and emotional volatility, rather than representing weaknesses, serve to make him unpredictable and dangerous in ways that more controlled opponents cannot anticipate. The Knights of Ren, Kylo's followers among Luke's former students, provide additional evidence of Snoke's sophisticated approach to corruption. These fallen Jedi were not simply turned to the dark side, but were fundamentally transformed, their original personalities subsumed beneath new identities that serve Snoke's purposes. The process appears to involve techniques that predate the Sith teachings, drawing on knowledge that may have been lost to the galaxy for thousands of years. Snoke's connection to the unknown regions extends beyond mere residence in those unexplored areas. Your investigation reveals that he has been systematically mapping and claiming entire sectors of space, establishing bases and resource extraction operations that have been preparing for his return to galactic prominence for decades. The scope of his preparations suggests foreknowledge of the Empire's eventual defeat and careful planning for the power vacuum that would follow. The dark side nexus that Snoke has created aboard his flagship, the Supremacy, represents a concentration of malevolent Force energy that rivals the most powerful Sith strongholds in galactic history. The massive vessel serves not just as a mobile command center, but as a temple to the dark side, its very presence capable of influencing weak-willed individuals across vast distances. The ship's design incorporates elements that appear to be based on pre-Republic technologies, suggesting access to knowledge that has been lost to mainstream civilization. Most disturbing of all is the evidence that Snoke's emergence as Supreme Leader of the First Order represents only the beginning of his true agenda. Communications intercepts reference a great work that extends far beyond the mere conquest of the New Republic, involving the transformation of the galaxy itself into something that would serve his ancient purposes. The scope of this project appears to involve the corruption or destruction of entire species, the manipulation of stellar phenomena, and the creation of conditions that would allow the dark side to achieve permanent dominance over the Force. The revelation of Snoke's true nature and ancient origins forces your team to confront the possibility that the coming conflict represents more than a political or military struggle between competing governments. The First Order serves as the instrument of a being whose agenda transcends normal concepts of power and control, whose victory would fundamentally alter the nature of life in the galaxy. The peaceful civilization that has flourished under the New Republic faces not just conquest but transformation into something that would serve the purposes of an entity whose plans have been developing for millennia. As you prepare to delve deeper into the First Order's network of hidden facilities, the weight of this knowledge settles over your team like a suffocating blanket. The enemy you face possesses not just superior technology and resources, but the accumulated wisdom and patience of ages. The galaxy's heroes, scattered and unprepared, must somehow find the strength to oppose a darkness that has been preparing for this moment since before their civilizations learned to reach for the stars. Deep within the unknown regions, on a world that once supported thriving ecosystems and diverse populations, the First Order has achieved something that surpasses even the Empire's greatest feat of engineering. Starkiller Base represents the transformation of an entire planet into a weapon of unimaginable destructive power, a project that required the complete consumption of a living world and its conversion into an instrument of galactic terror. The scale of this undertaking dwarfs the Death Star's construction, involving technologies and resources that demonstrate the First Order's capabilities exceed anything the Empire possessed at its height. The planet's original inhabitants, a peaceful species that had achieved remarkable harmony with their world's natural systems, were among the first casualties of the First Order's grand design. Their cities were dismantled to provide raw materials, their populations enslaved to provide labor, and their entire civilization erased to make room for the weapon that would carry their world's name across the galaxy as a symbol of absolute power. The few survivors were relocated to work camps where they spent their final years contributing to the destruction of everything they had once cherished. The engineering challenges involved in Starkiller Base's construction required innovations that pushed the boundaries of known science. Boring through a planet's core while maintaining structural integrity demanded new approaches to materials science and gravitational manipulation. The excavation created chambers large enough to house the weapon's primary components, including focusing arrays that could channel and direct the energy of an entire star. The planet's original geography was completely restructured, with mountain ranges relocated and ocean basins drained to accommodate the installation's requirements. The base's power source represents perhaps the most audacious aspect of its design. Rather than relying on conventional reactors or even hypermatter annihilation, Starkiller Base draws energy directly from nearby stars, literally consuming stellar mass to power its weapon systems. The process involves technologies that the Empire's scientists had only theorized about, requiring breakthroughs in energy manipulation that suggest access to knowledge far beyond what conventional research could have achieved in the decades since the Empire's fall. General Hux oversees the base's operations with the cold efficiency that defines the First Order's approach to warfare. His background in military logistics and resource management made him the ideal candidate to coordinate the massive undertaking required to convert a living world into a functional weapon system. Under his direction, entire star systems were strip-mined to provide the exotic materials needed for the base's construction, while populations were relocated or eliminated to prevent interference with the project's development. The weapons targeting system demonstrates capabilities that exceed even the Death Star's precision, able to track and engage targets across interstellar distances with accuracy that should be impossible given the limitations of conventional sensors and communications. The system incorporates technologies that appear to be based on dark side techniques, using the Force itself to guide the weapon's destructive energies across the vast emptiness of space. This fusion of technology and supernatural power represents a new paradigm in warfare that could render conventional defensive strategies obsolete. The base's defensive systems reflect lessons learned from the Death Star's vulnerabilities, incorporating redundant shielding, multiple command centers, and automated systems that can continue operating even if primary control facilities are compromised. The installation's planetary scale provides natural protection against most forms of attack, while its ability to move through hyperspace using the planet's remaining mass as a propulsion system makes it impossible to predict or intercept using conventional tactical approaches. Captain Phasma commands the ground forces responsible for the base's security, leading stormtrooper units that have been specially trained for operations in the installation's unique environment. These troops possess equipment and training that surpasses their Imperial predecessors, reflecting the First Order's commitment to addressing every weakness that the Rebellion exploited during the Galactic Civil War. Their chrome armor and advanced weapons represent the pinnacle of military technology, designed to ensure that no infiltration attempt could succeed against such a vital facility. The base's first target selection reveals the First Order's strategic thinking and their understanding of the new Republic's political structure. Rather than attacking military installations or strategic resources, they chose to strike at the heart of the Republic's government, eliminating the entire leadership structure in a single devastating blow. The Hosnian system's destruction would leave the galaxy without central authority, creating the chaos necessary for the First Order's rapid expansion and conquest. The psychological impact of Starkiller Base extends far beyond its immediate destructive capabilities. The weapon's very existence demonstrates that the First Order possesses the resources and determination to destroy entire star systems, making resistance seem not just futile but counterproductive. Worlds that might otherwise support the New Republic or aid resistance movements face the choice between submission and annihilation, with the certain knowledge that defiance will result in the complete destruction of everything they hold dear. The installation's construction required the complete transformation of the planet's climate and ecology, creating an ice world where once temperate forests had flourished. The engineering involved in this transformation demonstrates mastery of environmental manipulation on a planetary scale, suggesting capabilities that could be used to terraform worlds for the First Order's benefit, or render enemy systems uninhabitable. The technology represents a form of warfare that transcends traditional concepts of military engagement, threatening the very foundations of life itself. The base's complement of support vessels and manufacturing facilities makes it a completely self-sufficient military installation capable of operating independently for extended periods. Shipyards built into the planet's restructured surface can produce star destroyers and support vessels using materials extracted from the system's asteroid belts and outer planets. The facility represents not just a weapon but a mobile fortress capable of projecting First Order power across the galaxy without requiring external supply lines or support networks. The timing of the base's completion coincides with the First Order's broader strategic plans, providing the decisive weapon needed to cripple the New Republic's ability to organize effective resistance. Intelligence suggests that the installation's first operational use has been planned for months, with target selection based on comprehensive analysis of the Republic's political and military structure. The attack will be coordinated with conventional forces to maximize the chaos and prevent any organized response to the First Order's emergence. As your investigation reveals the full scope of Starkiller Base's capabilities and the meticulous planning behind its construction, the true magnitude of the threat facing the galaxy becomes apparent. This is not merely a weapon of war but an instrument of transformation designed to reshape galactic civilization according to the First Order's vision of absolute order and control. The peaceful galaxy that has existed for 30 years stands on the brink of a conflict that will determine whether freedom or tyranny will define the future of countless worlds and species. On the desert world of Jakku, where the Empire fought its final battle and left behind a graveyard of twisted metal and broken dreams, a young scavenger named Ray has built a life from the remnants of galactic conflict. The endless dunes that stretch beyond every horizon hold the wreckage of star destroyers and rebel cruisers, their hulls bleached white by twin suns and scoured clean by sandstorms that have raged for 3 decades. Among these monuments to war's futility, Ray has learned to find value in what others have discarded, salvaging components and artifacts that speak of technologies and purposes she can barely comprehend. Her daily routine begins before dawn, when the desert's crushing heat has not yet made exploration impossible. Armed with tools fashioned from starship components and wearing clothing patched together from various sources, she descends into the mechanical catacombs that lie beneath Jakku's surface. These buried vessels once carried thousands of beings across the galaxy, but now serve as hunting grounds for scavengers who risk their lives to recover anything of value from the technological graveyard that defines their world. The crashed Star Destroyer that dominates the landscape near Rey's makeshift home represents more than just a source of salvageable materials. Its massive bulk, half buried in sand dunes that shift with each storm, serves as a constant reminder of the conflict that brought war to this remote world. Rey has explored every accessible section of the vessel, mapping its corridors and compartments with the thoroughness of someone whose survival depends on intimate knowledge of her environment. She has found personal belongings that speak of the lives once lived aboard the ship, fragments of letters and holographic images that connect her to people she will never meet, but whose stories have become part of her own understanding of the galaxy. Her isolation on Jakku has been both blessing and curse, protecting her from the galaxy's larger conflicts while denying her the connections that most beings take for granted. The other scavengers who work the crash sites maintain an uneasy coexistence based on mutual necessity rather than friendship, sharing information about valuable finds while jealously guarding the locations of their most profitable discoveries. Reddy's exceptional skill at identifying and extracting useful components has earned her a reputation among the scavenger community, but also the suspicion and resentment of those who struggle to match her seemingly intuitive understanding of technology. The first manifestation of Rey's connection to the Force comes not as dramatic revelation, but as subtle enhancement of abilities she has always possessed. Her uncanny skill at predicting which components will be found in unexplored sections of crashed vessels begins to seem less like luck and more like supernatural insight. Her ability to understand and repair technologies she has never encountered before transcends normal learning, suggesting knowledge that comes from sources beyond conscious experience. These abilities develop gradually, their significance masked by the practical demands of survival on a world where failure to find salvage means hunger and exposure. The arrival of BB-8, the spherical droid carrying information that will reshape the galaxy's future, marks the beginning of Rey's transformation from isolated scavenger to central figure in the galaxy's struggle between light and darkness. Her decision to protect the droid from other scavengers who would sell it for parts reflects a moral compass that has survived despite years of hardship and solitude. The choice costs her immediate profit but connects her to purposes larger than personal survival, setting in motion events that will reveal her true nature and destiny. Her encounter with Finn, the former stormtrooper whose break from first-order conditioning represents his own awakening to moral choice, provides Rey with her first real companion in years. Their partnership begins as simple mutual aid, but evolves into something deeper as they discover shared values and complementary skills. Finn's knowledge of the galaxy beyond Jakku opens Rey's eyes to possibilities she had never imagined, while her connection to the Force begins to manifest in ways that even she cannot ignore or explain. The lightsaber that calls to Rey from the depths of Maz Kanata's castle represents more than just a weapon. It serves as a catalyst for the full awakening of her Force sensitivity. The moment she touches the ancient weapon, visions flood her consciousness with images of past and future, showing her glimpses of the eternal conflict between light and dark that has shaped galactic history. She sees Luke Skywalker in his youth, witnesses the fall of Jedi she has never known, and confronts terrifying images of darkness that threatens to consume everything she holds dear. The visions reveal connections that transcend time and space, showing Rey that her isolation on Jakku was not random chance, but part of a larger pattern that connects her to the Skywalker legacy and the ancient struggle between Jedi and Sith. The lightsaber's history, passing through the hands of Anakin Skywalker and his son Luke, creates a bridge between generations that allows Rey to inherit not just a weapon, but a responsibility that will define the rest of her life. Her first lightsaber duel with Kylo Ren in the forests of Starkiller Base demonstrates powers that should require years of training to develop, drawing on instincts she doesn't fully understand. Rey matches the Dark Warrior's skill, despite her complete lack of formal instruction. The Force flows through her with a purity and strength that suggests potential exceeding even the legendary Skywalker bloodline, marking her as someone who could tip the balance in the coming conflict between the Resistance and the First Order. The defeat of Kylo Ren, accomplished through determination and connection to the Force rather than superior technique or experience, establishes Rey as a figure of hope in a galaxy that has been systematically stripped of its champions. Her victory demonstrates that the light side of the Force remains strong despite decades of suppression, and that new heroes can emerge even from the most unlikely circumstances to challenge the darkness that threatens to engulf everything. The search for Luke Skywalker, that concludes Rey's initial journey, represents more than just a mission to find a missing Jedi Master. It symbolizes the galaxy's desperate need for guidance and leadership in the face of overwhelming threats. Rey's arrival on Arch 2, carrying Luke's lightsaber and the hopes of the Resistance, creates a moment of connection between past and future that will determine whether the Jedi tradition can survive its greatest test. Rey's awakening to the Force occurs at the moment when the galaxy most needs someone with her unique combination of power and moral clarity. Her background as a scavenger has taught her to find value in what others discard, a skill that proves essential when applied to the Jedi teachings that Luke has abandoned in his despair. Her fresh perspective, unconstrained by the traditions and failures that haunt the surviving Jedi Master, offers the possibility of rebuilding the light side's influence in ways that address the shortcomings of the past. The Force that awakens in Rey represents hope, not just for victory over the First Order, but for the restoration of balance to a galaxy that has been torn between extremes of light and dark for millennia. Her journey from isolated scavenger to emerging Jedi demonstrates that heroism can arise from the most humble origins, and that the power to change the galaxy's fate exists within individuals who possess the courage to embrace their destiny, despite the dangers and responsibilities that come with such power. Deep within the sterile corridors of a First Order Star Destroyer, where the air itself seems to carry the weight of absolute obedience and unquestioning loyalty, a single stormtrooper designated FN 2187 experiences something that his conditioning was designed to prevent. The moment arrives, not with dramatic fanfare, but as a quiet crack in the foundation of everything he has been taught to believe, a hairline fracture in his programmed responses that will eventually shatter the entire structure of his manufactured identity. The conditioning process that created FN 2187 began before his conscious memory, in facilities hidden throughout the unknown regions, where the First Order transforms children into perfect soldiers. These installations operate with clinical efficiency, stripping away every trace of individual personality and replacing it with programmed responses designed to ensure absolute compliance with orders. The children who enter these facilities emerge as numbered units in a vast military machine, their original names forgotten and their capacity for independent thought systematically eliminated through techniques that combine psychological manipulation with pharmaceutical intervention. FN 2187's early years within the First Order system followed the standard pattern of indoctrination and training that had produced countless identical soldiers before him. His days were divided between physical conditioning that pushed his body to peak performance, tactical instruction that filled his mind with combat doctrine, and ideological programming that reinforced his loyalty to the organization's goals. Sleep periods were monitored to prevent dream formation that might foster individual identity, while nutrition was carefully controlled to maintain optimal physical condition while suppressing emotional development. The barracks where FN 2187 lived with his fellow stormtroopers reflected the First Order's philosophy of absolute uniformity and collective purpose. Personal possessions were forbidden, conversations were monitored and regulated, and every aspect of daily existence was structured to reinforce the individual's identity as part of a greater whole. The few friendships that developed despite these restrictions were carefully observed and, if deemed potentially problematic, disrupted through reassignment or more direct intervention. Captain Phasma's role in FN 2187's development exemplified the First Order's approach to leadership and motivation. Her chrome armor and commanding presence represented the pinnacle of stormtrooper achievement, the goal toward which every soldier was supposedly striving. Yet her interactions with her subordinates revealed the cold calculation that defined First Order methodology, treating individual stormtroopers as expendable resources rather than valuable team members. Her approval carried weight not because of any personal connection, but because it represented recognition from the system that had shaped their entire existence. The mission to Jakku, that would trigger FN 2187's transformation, began as a routine operation to recover information vital to the First Order's strategic objectives. The desert world's significance as a source of valuable intelligence made it a high-priority target, but the mission parameters suggested nothing unusual about the assignment. FN 2187 and his fellow stormtroopers approached the operation with the mechanical precision that their training had instilled, expecting to execute their orders and return to base without incident. The village on Jakku, where the operation took place, represented everything that the First Order claimed to oppose: disorganization, inefficiency, and the kind of chaotic freedom that supposedly led to galactic conflict. The inhabitants lived simple lives focused on survival and community rather than service to a greater cause, their priorities shaped by immediate needs rather than ideological commitment. Their resistance to First Order demands seemed irrational from the perspective of soldiers who had been taught that compliance was the highest virtue. The order to execute unarmed civilians marked the moment when FN 2187's conditioning finally failed him completely. Everything in his training demanded obedience to superior officers and adherence to mission parameters, but something deeper in his consciousness rebelled against the systematic murder of innocent people. The sight of his fellow stormtroopers carrying out the executions without hesitation or emotion forced him to confront the true nature of the organization he served and his own complicity in its actions. The psychological shock of recognizing his moral awakening created a cascade of questions that his conditioning was unable to suppress. If the First Order's methods were justified by their goals, why did the execution of civilians feel fundamentally wrong? If individual conscience was irrelevant compared to collective purpose, why did his own sense of right and wrong persist despite years of programming designed to eliminate such responses? The cognitive dissonance between his training and his moral instincts created an internal conflict that grew stronger with each passing moment. FN 2187's decision to free Poe Dameron represented the first conscious choice he had made as an individual, rather than as a component of the First Order system. The action required him to actively betray everything he had been programmed to serve, risking not just his own life, but his entire sense of identity. The process of planning and executing the escape forced him to think creatively and independently, skills that his conditioning had sought to suppress in favor of rigid adherence to established procedures. The escape itself became a crash course in the consequences of moral choice, as FN 2187 discovered that doing the right thing often involved accepting personal risk and uncertainty. The stolen TIE fighter that carried them away from the Star Destroyer represented more than just transportation. It symbolized his break from the First Order system and his emergence as an individual capable of independent action. The craft's destruction during their crash landing on Jakku's surface marked the final severing of his connection to his former life. His awakening to individual identity accelerated during his time on Jakku, as exposure to Rey's independent spirit and moral courage provided him with examples of how to live according to personal principles rather than external programming. Rey's instinctive compassion and determination to help others, even at personal cost, demonstrated values that his conditioning had attempted to eliminate, but which resonated with something fundamental in his nature. Their partnership allowed him to experience genuine friendship and mutual respect for the first time in his conscious memory. The choice of the name Finn suggested by Poe Dameron, based on his stormtrooper designation, represented more than just convenient identification. It marked his conscious decision to embrace individual identity and reject the numbered existence that the First Order had imposed upon him. The name became a symbol of his transformation from programmed soldier to free-thinking individual, a process that continued throughout his growing involvement with the resistance cause. Finn's knowledge of First Order procedures and installations proved invaluable to the resistance, but his real contribution lay in demonstrating that even the most thoroughly indoctrinated soldiers could break free from their programming when confronted with genuine moral choice. His defection provided hope that other stormtroopers might be reached and turned against their masters, suggesting that the First Order's apparent unity was more fragile than it appeared. His example proved that individual conscience could triumph over systematic conditioning when supported by friendship and moral purpose. The internal struggle between his programmed responses and his emerging individual identity created ongoing challenges as Finn learned to trust his own judgment rather than relying on external authority. Simple decisions that most people took for granted required conscious effort as he developed the confidence to act according to his own moral compass rather than seeking approval from superiors. The process was painful and uncertain, but it represented the essential work of becoming a complete person rather than remaining a programmed component of someone else's design. His growing relationship with Rey provided emotional anchor points as he navigated the complexities of individual choice and personal responsibility. Rey's acceptance of him as a friend and equal, despite his background as an enemy soldier, demonstrated the possibility of redemption and transformation that became central to his new understanding of himself and his place in the galaxy. Their mutual support and respect created a foundation for the kind of genuine human connection that his conditioning had been designed to prevent. Finn's transformation from Finn 2187 to a free-thinking individual capable of moral choice represented one of the most profound victories that the Resistance achieved against the First Order. His awakening demonstrated that the organization's control was not absolute, that individual conscience could survive even the most systematic attempts at suppression, and that people were capable of changing course when confronted with the consequences of their actions. His journey from programmed soldier to moral agent provided hope that the galaxy's future would be shaped by individual choices rather than imposed by authoritarian systems seeking to eliminate personal freedom and responsibility. In the depths of space, where the paths of destiny converge like streams flowing toward an inevitable confluence, the scattered heroes of a new generation find themselves drawn together by forces that transcend mere coincidence. The meeting of Rey, Finn, Han Solo, and Chewbacca aboard the Millennium Falcon represents more than a fortunate encounter. It marks the beginning of a fellowship that will challenge the First Order's seemingly unstoppable advance and rekindle hope in a galaxy that has forgotten the price of freedom. Han Solo's return to the center of galactic conflict comes reluctantly, his years of peace having softened neither his piloting skills nor his survival instincts, but having dulled his enthusiasm for causes that demand personal sacrifice. The decades following the Empire's defeat had allowed him to return to the comfortable life of a smuggler and adventurer, pursuing profit and excitement while avoiding the larger responsibilities that come with heroism. His encounter with Rey and Finn forces him to confront the reality that the galaxy's peace was more fragile than he had allowed himself to believe. The Millennium Falcon itself serves as a bridge between the old guard of the rebellion and the new heroes who must carry the torch forward. The ship's familiar corridors and jury-rigged systems carry echoes of past adventures and victories, while its current passengers represent the galaxy's future. Remy's intuitive understanding of the ship's systems amazes even Han, whose decades of experience with the vessel's quirks and modifications pale beside her seemingly supernatural ability to coax performance from machinery that should be beyond her comprehension. Chewbacca's presence provides continuity and wisdom that spans generations, his loyalty to Han balanced by his recognition of the larger stakes involved in the developing conflict. The Wookiee's natural instincts for danger and his protective nature extend to the new companions, creating a family dynamic that transcends species boundaries. His wordless communication with Rey suggests a connection that goes beyond normal interspecies interaction, hinting at sensitivities that complement her growing awareness of the Force. The revelation of BB-8's true cargo transforms their accidental meeting into a mission of galactic significance. The partial map to Luke Skywalker's location represents hope for the Resistance and a potential turning point in the conflict with the First Order. Han's knowledge of Luke's disappearance provides context for the map's importance, while his personal connection to the missing Jedi Master adds emotional weight to their growing commitment to the cause. Their journey to Maz Kanata's castle on Takodana represents a pause in the gathering storm, a moment of calm before the violence that will define their future relationship. The ancient pirates' establishment serves as neutral ground where beings from across the galaxy can interact without the political tensions that divide their home systems. Maz herself embodies the kind of wisdom that comes from centuries of observation, her small stature concealing insights that rival those of Jedi Masters. The Force-sensitive artifacts in Maz's collection speak to the broader universe of power and responsibility that awaits Rey's exploration. The lightsaber that calls to her represents not just a weapon but a legacy, connecting her to the Skywalker family line and the eternal struggle between light and darkness. Maz's recognition of Rey's potential provides external validation of the power that she has sensed growing within herself, while her warnings about the darkness rising hint at trials that will test every aspect of her character. Han's growing attachment to Rey reflects his recognition of qualities that remind him of his younger self, tempered by wisdom and moral clarity that he had to learn through painful experience. Her natural piloting ability and mechanical intuition echo his own gifts, while her instinctive compassion represents the kind of heroism that he has always admired but found difficult to sustain. Their relationship develops into something approaching a mentor-student dynamic, with Han providing practical knowledge while Rey offers inspiration and hope. The First Order's attack on Takodana shatters the peaceful interlude and forces the newly formed group into active combat against their enemies. The assault demonstrates the organization's reach and determination, while the heroes' response reveals their individual capabilities and growing teamwork. Red's capture by Kylo Ren creates the first major crisis that tests their commitment to each other, transforming their relationship from convenient partnership to genuine friendship based on mutual loyalty and shared purpose. Finn's decision to infiltrate Starkiller Base to rescue Rey represents his complete transformation from programmed soldier to free-thinking hero. The mission requires him to overcome not just physical obstacles but psychological barriers created by his conditioning and training. His willingness to risk everything for someone he has known only briefly demonstrates the power of genuine friendship to overcome the most systematic attempts at dehumanization. The reunion with Leia Organa at the Resistance base provides Han with a confrontation he has been avoiding for years, forcing him to acknowledge the personal cost of his retreat from galactic affairs. Their relationship, strained by the loss of their son to the dark side and their different approaches to coping with that tragedy, represents the kind of intimate casualty that war inflicts on those who fight it. Their brief reconciliation provides emotional foundation for the mission to Starkiller Base. The assault on the First Order's ultimate weapon requires the heroes to coordinate their individual abilities toward a common goal, with each member of the team contributing essential skills to the mission's success. Poe Dameron's tactical leadership of the fighter attack, Finn's knowledge of the base's vulnerabilities, and Rey's growing connection to the Force combine to create a plan that exploits the one weakness in an otherwise impregnable target. The personal stakes of the mission become clear when Han volunteers to confront his son, believing that parental love might succeed where military force has failed. His decision to risk everything on the possibility of Ben Solo's redemption reflects the same kind of faith in redemption that once saved him from a life of selfish pursuit. The choice demonstrates growth from the smuggler who once claimed to be interested only in profit to the hero who understands that some things are worth any sacrifice. The gathering storm that brings these heroes together represents more than military alliance. It creates a new family bound by choice rather than blood, united by shared values rather than common origin. Their diverse backgrounds and complementary skills create a team capable of facing challenges that would overwhelm any individual member. The bonds formed in crisis provide emotional strength that sustains them through the trials ahead. The force that flows through their relationships transcends individual power, creating connections that allow them to support and inspire each other, even when separated by vast distances. Red's growing abilities enhance the group's effectiveness, while their friendship provides her with the grounding necessary to resist the corruption that destroyed previous generations of Force users. Their unity represents hope that the galaxy's future will be shaped by cooperation rather than domination. As the heroes prepare for their desperate assault on Starkiller Base, they carry with them not just weapons and tactical plans, but the accumulated wisdom and strength that comes from genuine friendship. Their willingness to risk everything for each other and for the cause they serve demonstrates that heroism is not about individual power, but about the courage to stand together against overwhelming odds. The gathering storm has brought them together, and their unity will determine whether light or darkness shapes the galaxy's destiny. On Hosnian Prime, the gleaming capital of the New Republic, the morning of the galaxy's darkest day begins like any other, with senators arriving for legislative sessions and citizens going about their daily routines in blissful ignorance of the doom that approaches from the unknown regions. The planet's crystalline towers stretch toward cloudless skies that reflect the prosperity and optimism of a civilization that has known 30 years of peace. Children play in parks where memorials to war heroes stand as reminders of sacrifices that seem increasingly distant and abstract to generations who have never known the fear of imperial oppression. The Galactic Senate convenes in chambers designed to facilitate democracy and encourage debate, their architecture reflecting the New Republic's commitment to transparency and inclusive governance. Representatives from thousands of worlds gather to address the mundane but essential work of maintaining peace and prosperity across a galaxy that spans millions of inhabited systems. Trade disputes, resource allocation, and diplomatic protocols dominate their discussions, while reports of emerging threats from the unknown regions are dismissed as alarmist speculation. Senator Leia Organa's final appearance before the Senate carries the weight of prophecy, as she pleads for increased military preparedness and intelligence gathering in the face of mounting evidence of First-Order activity. Her words echo through chambers where her colleagues shift uncomfortably, their attention focused on maintaining the delicate balance of power that has preserved peace for 3 decades. The irony is not lost on history that the galaxy's greatest champion of democracy spends her final hours arguing for the very measures that might have prevented the catastrophe about to unfold. The New Republic Defense Fleet, reduced to a fraction of its wartime strength through decades of demilitarization efforts, maintains orbit around Hosnian Prime as both symbol and substance of the government's commitment to peaceful resolution of conflicts. The massive capital ships represent the ultimate guarantee of the Republic's security, their presence a reminder that the galaxy's democratic institutions rest on the foundation of military strength sufficient to deter aggression. The crews aboard these vessels have spent years in routine peacekeeping operations, their combat readiness diminished by the comfortable assumption that major threats to galactic stability are relics of the past. Admiral Statra's tactical briefings to the Senate Defense Committee on the morning of the attack focus on budget allocations and personnel assignments rather than strategic threats, reflecting the institutional complacency that has infected the Republic's military leadership. The intelligence reports that cross his desk speak of mysterious activities in the unknown regions, but the fragmentary nature of the information and the lack of clear threats to specific systems allow for interpretation that minimizes their significance. His final communications to fleet commanders concern routine maintenance schedules and training exercises. The Starkiller base's targeting systems lock onto the Hosnian system with precision that should be impossible across interstellar distances, the weapon's exotic technology transcending conventional limitations of space and time. The targeting calculations required to destroy multiple worlds with a single shot represent breakthroughs in physics and engineering that demonstrate the First Order's capabilities exceed anything the galaxy has previously encountered. The weapon's ability to split its beam and simultaneously target multiple celestial bodies transforms it from a planet killer into a system destroyer. The red beam that crosses space toward Hosnian Prime carries with it the concentrated energy of an entire star, its passage through hyperspace creating gravitational distortions that sensitive instruments throughout the galaxy detect as seismic events. The weapon's approach creates phenomena that astronomers struggle to explain, their theories inadequate to describe technology that operates beyond the boundaries of known science. The beam's visibility across vast distances serves the First Order's psychological warfare objectives, ensuring that countless worlds witness the Republic's destruction. General Huxley's address to the First Order Assembly on Starkiller Base provides the ideological framework for the attack. His words broadcast to First Order forces throughout the galaxy as justification for the genocide about to be committed. His rhetoric combines appeals to order and stability with promises of galactic unity under First Order rule, presenting the destruction of the new Republic as a necessary step toward lasting peace. The speech serves multiple purposes, rallying First Order personnel, intimidating potential enemies, and establishing the organization's claim to legitimate authority over the galaxy. The moment of impact transforms the Hosnian system into an expanding sphere of superheated plasma and debris, the combined mass of 5 worlds and their populations converted into energy that briefly outshines the system's star. The destruction occurs too quickly for evacuation or defense, denying the billions of inhabitants any opportunity to understand what is happening to them. The Senate chambers where democracy's representatives debated the galaxy's future become scattered atoms in the cosmic wind, their voices silenced in an instant. The New Republic Defense Fleet's destruction follows immediately, the massive warships torn apart by forces that exceed their defensive capabilities by orders of magnitude. Admiral Statra and his crew have time only to recognize the nature of the attack before their flagship disintegrates around them, their final moments spent in the futile attempt to coordinate a defense against an unstoppable force. The fleet that represented the Republic's military strength becomes another casualty of the First Order's demonstration of overwhelming power. The psychological impact of the Hosnian system's destruction extends far beyond the immediate casualties, creating a wave of terror that sweeps across the galaxy as worlds realize their vulnerability to the First Order's ultimate weapon. The attack demonstrates that distance provides no protection against enemies possessing such technology, that the most secure systems and the most powerful fleets offer no guarantee of survival. The message is clear: resistance is futile, and submission is the only path to survival. Communication networks throughout the galaxy carry news of the catastrophe, but the very institutions that would coordinate response to such a crisis have been eliminated, along with the government they served. The New Republic's decentralized structure, designed to prevent the concentration of power that enabled the Empire's tyranny, becomes a fatal weakness when faced with an enemy that can eliminate entire systems with single attacks. The governmental apparatus that took decades to build disintegrates in moments, leaving individual worlds to face the First Order's advance without coordination or support. The resistance base on Dakar receives confirmation of the attack through long-range sensors that detect the gravitational distortions created by the system's destruction. General Leah Organa's worst fears are realized as she contemplates the magnitude of the loss and the implications for the galaxy's future. The organization she built to address threats that others refused to acknowledge suddenly becomes the only military force capable of opposing the First Order's expansion, their modest resources representing the galaxy's last hope for freedom. The survivors scattered across the galaxy struggle to comprehend the scale of the catastrophe and its implications for their own futures. Worlds that had relied on the New Republic for protection find themselves isolated and vulnerable, their leaders forced to choose between submission to the First Order and desperate resistance against overwhelming odds. The comfortable assumption that peace was permanent gives way to the harsh reality that freedom requires eternal vigilance and the courage to fight for principles that others take for granted. The destruction of Hosnian Prime marks the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history, one written in fire and blood rather than hope and cooperation. The New Republic's dream of lasting peace dies with its capital, replaced by the First Order's vision of unity through subjugation. The galaxy's future will be determined not by democratic institutions and peaceful negotiation, but by the courage of those willing to stand against tyranny, despite the terrible cost of resistance. As the expanding debris field that was once a thriving star system continues its journey into the cosmic void, the galaxy struggles to comprehend a new reality, where entire civilizations can be extinguished in moments by enemies operating from the shadows. The age of peace has ended, and the age of total war has begun, with the First Order's demonstration of ultimate power serving as both declaration of intent and promise of consequences for those who dare to oppose their rule. In the hidden command center of the Resistance base on Dakar, where holographic displays show the impossible magnitude of the task ahead, General Leia Organa addresses the assembled pilots and ground troops who represent the galaxy's last hope against the First Order's ultimate weapon. The briefing room fills with the quiet tension of professionals who understand that they are about to attempt something that military doctrine would classify as suicide, a direct assault on a fortified planet, using a force barely large enough to constitute a squadron by traditional standards. Admiral Akbar's tactical analysis reveals the staggering disparity between the Resistance's capabilities and the defenses protecting Starkiller Base. The weapon planet possesses shields that can deflect entire fleet bombardments, defensive batteries that can destroy capital ships at extreme range, and a fighter complement that outnumbers the Resistance's entire military force by orders of magnitude. The base's planetary scale provides natural protection against conventional attacks, while its ability to destroy star systems makes any prolonged siege impossible. Commander Poe Dameron's fighter squadron represents the spearhead of the assault, their modified X-Wings equipped with enhanced shields and weapon systems that push the boundaries of what the fighters can safely handle. Each pilot understands that their survival depends not on superior numbers or firepower, but on speed, skill, and the kind of coordinated teamwork that can exploit momentary weaknesses in seemingly impregnable defenses. Their pre-flight preparations carry the weight of ritual, each pilot performing personal ceremonies that acknowledge the likelihood they will not return from this mission. The intelligence provided by Finn proves invaluable in identifying the base's single critical vulnerability, the thermal oscillator that regulates the planet's internal temperature and prevents the weapon's power systems from overheating during operation. The structure's location deep within the planet's converted core makes it nearly impossible to target from orbit, requiring a precisely coordinated attack that combines external assault with internal sabotage. The plan demands split-second timing and flawless execution from every participant. The approach to Starkiller Base through hyperspace represents a calculated risk that could result in the mission's failure before it truly begins. The planet's gravitational field and defensive systems create hazards that make conventional navigation impossible, requiring pilots to rely on instinct and the Force rather than instruments and established procedures. The exit from hyperspace brings them face to face with a sight that tests their resolve, a world completely transformed into a weapon of unimaginable power. The planet's surface reveals the full scope of the First Order's achievement in converting a living world into an instrument of destruction. Massive trenches carved into the crust expose the weapon's internal mechanisms, while defensive installations crown every elevated position with firepower sufficient to destroy small fleets. The transformation represents not just engineering excellence but a complete rejection of the natural order, the replacement of life and growth with death and destruction on a planetary scale. The fighter engagement that erupts around Starkiller Base's defensive perimeter demonstrates the pilots' extraordinary skill and the inadequacy of their resources against the First Order's overwhelming numerical advantage. TIE fighters swarm from hidden bays like insects from a disturbed nest, their sleek designs incorporating improvements that address every weakness the rebellion had exploited during the Galactic Civil War. The battle becomes a test of individual pilot skill rather than tactical advantage, with survival measured in seconds rather than minutes. Poe Dameron's leadership during the aerial battle combines tactical brilliance with inspirational courage, his voice over the communication channels providing guidance and encouragement to pilots facing impossible odds. His flying demonstrates the kind of intuitive understanding of combat that transcends formal training, each maneuver perfectly calculated to maximize damage while minimizing exposure to enemy fire. His X-Wing becomes a symbol of defiance, its survival inspiring others to push beyond their perceived limitations. The ground assault team's infiltration of the base requires them to navigate security systems designed to detect and eliminate any unauthorized presence. Han Solo's knowledge of Imperial procedures combined with Finn's understanding of First Order protocols allows them to move through the installation's corridors with the confidence of authorized personnel. Their progress toward the thermal oscillator takes them through sections of the base that reveal the scope of the weapon's internal complexity. The reunion between Han Solo and his son Ben, now known as Kylo Ren, occurs on a bridge spanning the reactor core, where the planet's stolen energy is converted into the weapon's destructive power. The confrontation represents more than a family crisis. It embodies the larger conflict between love and power, between the connections that bind the galaxy together and the forces that seek to tear it apart. Han's attempt to reach the person his son once was demonstrates faith in redemption that transcends rational hope. The lightsaber duel between Rey and Kylo Ren in the forests surrounding the thermal oscillator represents the awakening of a new generation of Force users, their conflict echoing the eternal struggle between light and darkness that has shaped galactic history. Rey's untrained but intuitive use of the Force contrasts with Kylo's sophisticated but emotionally unstable technique, their battles serving as both personal confrontation and symbolic representation of the larger war's moral dimensions. The destruction of the thermal oscillator creates a cascade failure that begins the planet's collapse, the weapon's own power turning against the installation that houses it. The explosion propagates through the planet's converted core, destroying systems that had taken decades to construct and install. The First Order's ultimate weapon becomes victim of its own design, the very forces that made it so powerful, ensuring its complete destruction once the regulating mechanisms fail. The evacuation of personnel from the dying planet creates scenes of chaos and panic as First Order forces abandon their posts and flee in whatever vessels they can commandeer. The disciplined order that had characterized the installation's operation dissolves into desperate self-preservation, with individual survival taking precedence over organizational loyalty. The planet's death throes create gravitational anomalies that make escape increasingly difficult as time passes. The Resistance fighters' withdrawal from the collapsing planet requires flying through debris fields and gravitational distortions that test their piloting skills to the absolute limit. Each second of delay increases the likelihood that they will be caught in the planet's final destruction, their victory meaningless if they cannot survive to report their success. The race against time becomes a testament to the pilot's determination and skill. The planet's final moments as it collapses into a new star provide a spectacular end to the First Order's most ambitious project. The forces unleashed by the weapon's destruction create a temporary stellar phenomenon that can be observed from systems throughout the galaxy, serving as a beacon of hope for worlds that had resigned themselves to first-order domination. The light of the dying planet carries news of the Resistance's victory across the darkness of space. The cost of victory becomes apparent as the survivors count their losses and assess the damage to their already limited forces. The success of the mission provides hope for the galaxy's future, but the casualties sustained in achieving that success represent a significant blow to the Resistance's capabilities. Each pilot lost represents irreplaceable experience and skill that will be desperately needed in the conflicts ahead. The destruction of Starkiller Base demonstrates that the First Order, despite its apparent invincibility, possesses vulnerabilities that can be exploited by determined opponents willing to accept enormous risks. The victory provides proof that courage and skill can overcome overwhelming odds, that the galaxy's freedom is not yet lost, despite the devastating losses inflicted by the enemy. The successful assault becomes a symbol of hope that inspires resistance movements throughout the galaxy to continue their struggle against tyranny. On the bridge that spans the reactor core of Starkiller Base, where the planet's stolen stellar energy churns in contained fury beneath crystalline surfaces that reflect the light of destruction, Han Solo faces the moment that will define not only his own legacy, but the future of the galaxy itself. The industrial cathedral that surrounds them pulses with power drawn from dying stars, its architecture serving as a monument to the First Order's philosophy of transformation through destruction. Above them, the planet's surface operations continue their deadly work, while below, the forces that will soon tear the world apart await their release. The journey that brought Han to this confrontation began not with his decision to join the assault on Starkiller Base, but with his choice decades earlier to step away from the galactic stage and return to the comfortable life of a smuggler and adventurer. The years following the Empire's defeat had allowed him to avoid the larger responsibilities that came with being a hero of the rebellion, pursuing personal satisfaction, while others shaped the galaxy's political future. His retreat from public life reflected not cowardice but weariness, the natural desire of someone who had given enough of himself to galactic causes. The loss of Ben Solo to the dark side had shattered more than just Han's family. It had destroyed his faith in the possibility of lasting peace and his belief that the sacrifices of the rebellion had purchased something permanent and valuable. The boy who should have represented hope for the future instead became a living reminder of failure, his fall to darkness poisoning the very foundations of everything Han had fought to protect. The pain of that loss drove Han away from Leia and back to the galaxy's margins, where personal relationships carried less risk of devastating consequences. His encounter with Rey and Finn had reawakened something in Han that he thought he had successfully buried, the instinct to protect the innocent and stand against tyranny, regardless of personal cost. Rey's enthusiasm and moral clarity reminded him of qualities he had once possessed, while Finn's courage in breaking free from First Order conditioning demonstrated that even the most systematic oppression could not completely eliminate the human capacity for choice. Their influence helped him remember who he had been before pain and loss taught him to guard his heart. The decision to infiltrate Starkiller Base represented more than tactical necessity. It offered Han the possibility of redemption through one final act of heroism that might repair the damage his withdrawal had caused to his family and the galaxy. His knowledge of Imperial procedures and his reputation as someone who could accomplish impossible tasks made him the logical choice to lead the ground assault, but his acceptance of the mission reflected deeper motivations than mere tactical advantage. The reunion with Leia before the mission provided both inspiration and burden, their brief reconciliation serving as reminder of what their family had been before Ben's fall drove them apart. Her faith in his ability to reach their son carried weight that transcended military objectives, transforming his mission from simple sabotage to an attempt at family healing that could restore connections thought to be permanently severed. The kiss they shared carried the weight of all their shared history and the hope that their story might yet have a happy ending. Walking through the corridors of Starkiller Base with Finn and Chewbacca, Han found himself remembering similar infiltrations during the rebellion, missions where the stakes had seemed impossibly high, but where friendship and determination had somehow proven sufficient to overcome overwhelming odds. The base's architecture reflected the same imperial aesthetic that had defined the Death Star and Star Destroyers, but the scale and sophistication of the installation demonstrated how far the First Order had advanced beyond their predecessors' capabilities. The encounter with Kylo Ren on the bridge occurred exactly as Han had hoped and feared. His son stood before him, not as the boy who had once brought joy to their family, but as a figure wrapped in darkness and consumed by anger that had festered for years. The mask that concealed Ben's features served as both literal and symbolic barrier between father and son, representing the layers of hurt and manipulation that had transformed a beloved child into an instrument of the dark side. Yet beneath the artificial voice and imposing presence, Han could still sense the conflict that raged within his son's heart. The conversation that followed carried the weight of years of separation and misunderstanding, each word carefully chosen to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. Han's approach combined the directness that had always characterized his personality with a gentleness that few outside his family had ever witnessed. He spoke not as a military commander addressing an enemy, but as a father reaching out to a son who had lost his way, offering understanding rather than judgment, and love rather than condemnation. Ben's response revealed the depth of his internal struggle, his voice carrying echoes of the boy who had once looked up to his father with uncomplicated admiration. The removal of his mask served as symbolic gesture of vulnerability, revealing a face marked by the same pain and uncertainty that had driven his parents apart. The young man who emerged from behind the artificial barrier appeared younger and more fragile than his imposing presence had suggested, his features bearing the unmistakable resemblance to both his parents. The moment when Ben confessed his internal conflict and asked for his father's help represented the culmination of everything Han had hoped to achieve through this desperate mission. The admission that the pull of the light side continued to torment him despite his commitment to the dark side provided evidence that redemption remained possible, that the boy they had loved still existed beneath the layers of Sith conditioning and emotional manipulation. Han's response came from the depths of paternal love that had survived even the worst betrayals and disappointments. The lightsaber that passed between father and son carried symbolic weight that transcended its function as a weapon. The moment when Ben accepted the blade represented not just the return of a family heirloom, but acknowledgement of the connection between them and the possibility of choosing a different path. Han's willingness to trust his son with a weapon that could be used against him demonstrated faith that went beyond rational calculation, the kind of unconditional love that parents reserve for their children, regardless of circumstances. The instant when the blade ignited through Han's chest marked the final victory of the dark side over the light within Ben Solo, the moment when Kylo Ren chose his master's teachings over his family's love. The physical pain of the wound paled beside the emotional agony of realizing that his faith in redemption had been misplaced, that the son he had hoped to save had instead chosen to embrace the darkness completely. Yet even in that moment of ultimate betrayal, Han's final act was one of compassion rather than condemnation. The touch of Han's hand on his son's face as his life ebbed away represented forgiveness, offered freely, despite the magnitude of the betrayal, a father's love that persisted even in the face of ultimate rejection. The gesture carried no reproach or anger, only the sadness of a parent who had failed to save his child from forces beyond his understanding. Ben's reaction to that final moment of tenderness revealed the cost of his choice, the emotional wound that would never fully heal despite his commitment to the dark side. The fall from the bridge into the reactor core below provided a dramatic end to a life that had been defined by dramatic gestures and impossible odds. Han Solo's death occurred in a setting that reflected the industrial might of the forces he had spent his life opposing, his final moments illuminated by the same kind of artificial light that had defined imperial installations throughout his career. The irony was not lost that the man who had always prided himself on practical solutions died attempting something that logic insisted was impossible. Chewbacca's anguished cry, as he witnessed his longtime friend's murder, echoed through the installation's corridors, carrying the grief of someone who had shared decades of adventure and danger with the fallen hero. The Wookiee's immediate response, triggering the explosive charges that began the base's destruction, represented both revenge for Han's death and completion of the mission that had cost his friend's life. The loyalty that had defined their partnership persisted even beyond death, driving Chewbacca to ensure that Han's sacrifice would not be meaningless. Leia's perception of Han's death through the Force created a moment of connection across the vast distance that separated them, her awareness of the loss transcending physical limitations to share in the final moments of their relationship. The pain that struck her as her husband died served as both confirmation of their enduring bond and preparation for the grief that would follow. Her ability to sense the event provided closure that many bereaved partners never receive, but also burden of knowing exactly when and how her loved one died. The impact of Han's death on Rey and Finn, who had come to see him as a father figure and mentor, demonstrated the way his influence had extended beyond his immediate family to inspire a new generation of heroes. Their grief transformed into determination to complete the mission he had died attempting, his sacrifice providing motivation that carried them through the trials ahead. The legacy he left them included not just practical knowledge but moral example of courage in the face of impossible odds. The galaxy's reaction to news of Han Solo's death reflected the complicated relationship between the former smuggler and the civilization he had helped save. While official tributes celebrated his role in the rebellion and his contributions to the Empire's defeat, the personal stories shared by those who had known him revealed a man whose loyalty and courage had touched countless lives in ways that official histories could never capture. His death marked the end of an era, the passing of one of the last heroes of the galactic civil war. The transformation of Ben Solo into Kylo Ren was completed not by Sith training or dark side indoctrination, but by the act of murdering his own father, a crime that severed his last connection to the light side of the Force. The deed that Snoke had demanded, as proof of his apprentice's commitment to the dark side, created a wound in Ben's soul that would never heal, a source of pain that would drive him deeper into darkness with each passing day. The patricide that was meant to grant him power instead bound him more tightly to his master's will. Han Solo's final gift to the galaxy was not his life, but the demonstration that love persists even in the face of ultimate betrayal, that fathers will sacrifice everything for their children, even when those children choose darkness over light. His death served as catalyst for the events that followed, inspiring others to acts of heroism that would eventually lead to the First Order's defeat. The scoundrel who had once claimed to be motivated only by profit died as a hero, his sacrifice proving that redemption is possible for anyone willing to pay its price. On the ancient island of Arc II, where the morning mist rises from seas that have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, Luke Skywalker stands at the edge of a cliff, watching the horizon as he has done for countless days since beginning his self-imposed exile. The rhythmic crash of waves against weathered stone provides a constant reminder of time's passage and the eternal cycles that govern all existence, while the cries of native porgs echo across the rocky landscape like voices from a simpler world where the Force's burden does not weigh so heavily on sensitive souls. The arrival of the Millennium Falcon breaks the solitude that Luke has maintained for years, its familiar silhouette stirring memories of adventures and friendships that belong to a different lifetime. The ship's presence in Oshtu's atmosphere represents more than simple transportation. It serves as a bridge between the hermit he has become and the hero he once was. carrying with it the hopes and expectations of a galaxy that refuses to accept that its champions can simply walk away from their responsibilities. Reda's emergence from the Falcon carries the determination and hope that have sustained her through every trial since leaving Jakku, her journey to find Luke representing not just personal quest, but the galaxy's desperate need for guidance in its darkest hour. The map fragments that led her to this remote world serve as testimony to the lengths that desperate people will go to find hope. The careful preservation of ancient knowledge that might someday prove essential to survival. Her presence on the island represents the collision of two worlds, the isolation that Luke has carefully constructed, and the urgent reality of galactic conflict that refuses to be ignored. The moment when Rey extends Luke's lightsaber toward him represents more than the return of a lost artifact. It symbolizes the galaxy's plea for him to resume the role that he has abandoned in despair and self-doubt. The weapon that once belonged to his father and later served as his own tool of justice carries with it the weight of Skywalker legacy and the expectations of countless beings who see the Jedi as their last hope against the darkness that threatens to consume everything they hold dear. The blue blade that once cut through Imperial oppression now serves as a bridge between past heroism and future possibility. Luke's initial reaction to Rey's presence reflects the psychological barriers he has constructed during his years of isolation, his refusal to accept the lightsaber serving as rejection of the responsibilities that its return represents. The hermit who throws the weapon over his shoulder and walks away demonstrates the depth of his disillusionment and his determination to avoid repeating the mistakes that led to such devastating consequences. His behavior shocks Rey, whose image of the legendary Jedi Master bears little resemblance to the broken man before her. The island's ancient structures provide constant reminders of the Jedi Order's long history and the cyclical nature of its rise and fall throughout galactic history. The first Jedi Temple, carved from living stone by beings whose names have been forgotten for millennia, serves as monument to ideals that transcended individual limitations and species boundaries. The sacred texts housed within these walls contain wisdom accumulated over thousands of years, but their teachings seem inadequate to address the failures that have driven Luke to exile. The temple's architecture speaks of a time when the Force was viewed as a source of wonder rather than burden, when Jedi Masters saw their role as guardians of peace rather than warriors, destined to repeat cycles of violence. Rey's persistence in the face of Luke's rejection demonstrates the determination that has defined her character since childhood, her refusal to accept defeat, even when confronted with seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Her training begins not through formal instruction, but through observation and imitation, watching Luke's daily routines and attempting to understand the connection between physical discipline and spiritual growth. The force that flows through her responds to her efforts with increasing strength and sophistication, manifesting abilities that surprise even her reluctant teacher. The revelation of Luke's connection to Kylo Ren's fall provides context for his self-imposed exile and his refusal to train another Force-sensitive student. The story of that terrible night when fear and vision of darkness led him to consider killing his own nephew serves as confession of the failure that haunts every moment of his isolation. Luke's description of the incident reveals not just the facts of what occurred, but the psychological journey that transformed a moment of weakness into a lifetime of self-recrimination. The lightsaber that ignited in Ben Solo's sleeping quarters for just an instant created consequences that continue to reshape the galaxy's destiny. The training sessions that eventually develop between Luke and Rey reflect his gradual acceptance that the galaxy's need for guidance outweighs his fear of causing further harm. The lessons combine practical instruction in Force techniques with philosophical discussions about the nature of power and responsibility, the eternal tension between action and restraint that defines the Jedi path. Rey's natural abilities and moral instincts provide Luke with hope that the next generation of Force users might avoid the mistakes that have plagued their predecessors. The Force connection that links Rey and Kylo Ren across vast distances represents a phenomenon that Luke has never encountered in his studies of Jedi lore, a bond that transcends normal limitations of space and time to create shared experiences between beings who should be separated by incompatible allegiances. The conversations that occur through this connection reveal the complexity of Ben Solo's fall and the ongoing struggle between light and dark that continues to rage within him despite his commitment to his Dark Master. The ancient Jedi texts that Luke has preserved on R2 contain knowledge that spans millennia, wisdom accumulated by countless generations of Force users who faced their own trials and temptations. These volumes represent the accumulated learning of the Jedi Order, but Luke's relationship with them reflects his ambivalence about the traditions they represent. The books serve as both repository of valuable knowledge and reminder of the institutional failures that led to the Order's destruction during the Clone Wars. The island's native inhabitants, the Porgs and the caretakers, provide Luke with examples of life that exists in harmony with natural forces without the complications introduced by supernatural power and galactic responsibility. The Porg's simple joy in existence and the caretakers' dedication to maintaining the island's ancient structures demonstrate approaches to life that Luke envies but cannot fully embrace given his unique position in the galaxy's affairs. The meditation techniques that Luke practices during his exile combine traditional Jedi methods with innovations born from solitude and reflection, creating approaches to the Force that emphasize balance and acceptance rather than active manipulation of cosmic energies. His daily routines reflect attempts to find peace within himself while maintaining awareness of the larger currents that flow through the galaxy, the constant struggle between withdrawal and engagement that defines his existence on Arc 2. The revelation of Rey's extraordinary potential forces Luke to confront his responsibilities as the last trained Jedi in the galaxy, the burden of passing on knowledge and wisdom that will die with him if he continues to refuse students. Rey's abilities suggest power that equals or exceeds the Skywalker bloodline, combined with moral clarity that might allow her to avoid the falls that have characterized so many powerful Force users throughout history. Her presence on Ash 2 represents hope for the future of the Jedi tradition. The growing connection between teacher and student develops despite Luke's initial reluctance, their relationship evolving from mutual suspicion to grudging respect to genuine affection based on shared commitment to protecting the innocent. Refi's influence on Luke proves as significant as his instruction of her optimism and determination, helping to heal wounds that years of isolation had failed to address. The bond between them creates foundation for the restoration of hope that both desperately need. The moment when Luke decides to return to active involvement in galactic affairs represents victory of duty over despair, the triumph of hope over the fear that has paralyzed him for years. His decision to help the Resistance reflects not just acceptance of responsibility, but recognition that withdrawal from conflict does not eliminate the need for heroes willing to stand against darkness. The Last Jedi's return to the galactic stage marks the beginning of a new chapter in the eternal struggle between light and shadow. The final lesson that Luke imparts to Rey before leaving Arch 2 concerns the nature of failure and the possibility of redemption, the understanding that even the greatest mistakes can be overcome by those willing to continue fighting for what is right. His own journey from hero to hermit to hero again demonstrates that the path of the Jedi is not about perfection but about the courage to continue despite failures and setbacks. The wisdom he shares with Rey will guide her through the trials ahead. As Luke prepares to rejoin the galaxy's conflicts, the island of H2 remains as testament to the power of solitude and reflection to heal even the deepest wounds. The ancient temple and sacred texts will continue to preserve Jedi wisdom for future generations, while the natural beauty of the island serves as a reminder that peace and harmony are possible even in a galaxy torn by conflict. The lessons learned in exile will inform Luke's final acts as a Jedi Master. his understanding of balance and sacrifice guiding him toward a destiny that will inspire hope across the stars. In the throne room of the Supremacy, Supreme Leader Snoke's flagship that serves as both command center and temple to the dark side of the Force, the ancient being who has manipulated galactic events for millennia prepares to demonstrate the full extent of his power. The massive vessel, larger than any ship in galactic history, drifts through space like a metallic predator, its angular surfaces reflecting the light of distant stars, while its interior chambers pulse with dark energy that corrupts everything it touches. The throne room itself represents the pinnacle of Sith architectural philosophy, designed to inspire fear and demonstrate absolute power through overwhelming scale and malevolent beauty. Rey's arrival aboard the Supremacy occurs not through her own choice, but as prisoner of Kylo Ren, who believes that delivering her to his master will prove his commitment to the dark side and secure his position as heir to Snoke's power. The journey through the ship's corridors reveals the scope of the First Order's capabilities and the extent to which their technology has advanced beyond anything the galaxy has previously encountered. The vessel's crew moves with the mechanical precision that characterizes all First Order personnel, their dedication to their duties reflecting the systematic indoctrination that has shaped their entire existence. The Force connection that links Rey and Kylo Ren across space has grown stronger with each encounter, creating a bond that transcends their opposing allegiances and suggests possibilities that neither fully understands. Their shared experiences through this connection have revealed the complexity of Ben Solo's fall and the ongoing struggle between light and dark that continues to rage within him, despite his commitment to his master's teachings. The connection represents something new in the galaxy's experience of the Force, a phenomenon that challenges traditional understanding of light and dark side philosophy. Snoke's presence in the throne room radiates malevolent power that seems to warp reality itself, his scarred and twisted form serving as testament to the dark side's corrupting influence, while his golden robes suggest the wealth and authority that his position commands. The Supreme Leader's physical appearance reflects exposure to dark side energies over periods that exceed normal lifespans, his survival through means that violate natural law, demonstrating mastery of techniques that predate the Sith traditions. His voice carries the weight of ancient authority, each word calculated to inspire fear and compel obedience from those who hear it. The interrogation of Rey that follows her arrival reveals not just Snoke's interest in her growing abilities, but his deeper understanding of the Force connection that links her to his apprentice. The ancient being recognizes the phenomenon as something that his extensive knowledge of dark side lore has prepared him to exploit, a bridge between minds that can be used to manipulate both participants in ways they cannot perceive or resist. His questions probe not just her knowledge of Luke Skywalker's location, but her emotional vulnerabilities and psychological weaknesses. The revelation of Snoke's role in creating and manipulating the Force connection between Rey and Kylo Ren demonstrates the scope of his power and the patience with which he executes his plans. The bond that both young Force users believed was natural and spontaneous was actually engineered by their enemy as tool for psychological manipulation and strategic advantage. The Supreme Leader's ability to bridge minds across vast distances represents mastery of techniques that extend far beyond anything the Jedi or traditional Sith ever achieved. Reki's resistance to Snoke's mental intrusions reflects not just her natural strength in the Force, but her moral conviction and determination to protect those she cares about from the consequences of her potential failure. The interrogation becomes a battle of wills between ancient malevolence and youthful determination, with the Supreme Leader seeking to break her spirit while she struggles to maintain her sense of self in the face of overwhelming dark power. Her defiance surprises Snoke, who had expected her youth and inexperience to make her easy to manipulate. The moment when Rey's lightsaber flies past Kylo Ren to strike Snoke represents the culmination of manipulation and betrayal that spans multiple generations, the apprentice finally striking down the master who had shaped his fall to the dark side. The Supreme Leader's death occurs not through direct confrontation, but through the kind of deception that he had used to control others, his own methods turned against him by the student he had trained to embrace such techniques. The ancient being's surprise at his apprentice's betrayal reflects the arrogance that ultimately proves his undoing. The battle against Snoke's elite Praetorian guards that follows the Supreme Leader's death demonstrates the combat effectiveness that Rey and Kylo Ren can achieve when they fight together, rather than against each other. Their coordination in the throne room reflects not just their force connection, but their complementary fighting styles. Rey's intuitive approach combining with Kylo's formal training to create a partnership that proves more effective than either could achieve alone. The Crimson Armored Guards represent the pinnacle of First-Order military training, but their disciplined techniques prove inadequate against opponents who fight with both skill and supernatural ability. The lightsaber combat that fills the throne room represents the fusion of different traditions and approaches to force wielding, with Rey's self-taught techniques complementing Kylo's formal instruction in ways that create new possibilities for both combatants. Their movements flow together with the kind of synchronization that suggests deep understanding of each other's capabilities and limitations, their force connection allowing them to anticipate and support each other's actions without conscious communication. The battle becomes a dance of death performed by partners who understand each other at levels that transcend normal human interaction. The aftermath of the battle, with Snoke's body lying broken beside his throne and his guards scattered across the chamber floor, creates a moment of possibility where the future seems to hang in balance between redemption and continued darkness. Refi's belief that Ben Solo can be turned back to the light side leads her to offer him a chance at redemption, to join her in building something better than either the First Order or the failed institutions that preceded it. Her extended hand represents hope for a different future, one where the mistakes of previous generations need not be repeated. Kylo Ren's rejection of Rey's offer and his assumption of the role of Supreme Leader represents the final transformation of Ben Solo into something that transcends his original fall to the dark side. His decision to embrace absolute power rather than accepting redemption demonstrates that his corruption has become complete, that the boy who once possessed the potential for great good has chosen to become something that serves only his own vision of galactic order. His choice destroys Rey's hopes for his redemption and establishes him as the primary antagonist for the conflicts that will follow. The destruction of Snoke's ring and the assumption of supreme authority by his former apprentice marks the beginning of a new era in First Order leadership, one characterized by the impulsive violence and emotional instability that define Kylo Ren's approach to power. Unlike his master, who exercised control through careful manipulation and patient planning, the new Supreme Leader relies on fear and direct force to maintain authority over his subordinates. His leadership style creates opportunities for rebellion and resistance that his predecessors' methods had suppressed. The escape from the crumbling throne room requires Rey to abandon her hopes for Ben Solo's redemption and focus on survival in the face of his complete transformation into Kylo Ren. Her departure from the supremacy represents not just physical escape, but acceptance that some people cannot be saved despite the best efforts of those who care about them. The lesson proves painful but necessary, preparing her for the leadership role she will need to assume in the conflicts ahead. The political implications of Snoke's death extend far beyond the immediate tactical situation, creating a power vacuum within the First Order that will affect the organization's unity and effectiveness in the battles to come. The Supreme Leader's demise removes the central authority that had held the diverse factions of the First Order together, potentially creating opportunities for the Resistance to exploit divisions and internal conflicts within their enemies' ranks. The ancient being's death marks the end of one era and the beginning of another, with consequences that will reshape the galaxy's future. The knowledge that Rey gains during her time aboard the Supremacy provides invaluable intelligence about First Order capabilities and intentions, information that will prove crucial in the Resistance's efforts to oppose their enemy's expansion and consolidation of power. Her first-hand experience of the organization's leadership and their internal dynamics offers insights that no amount of external observation could provide, understanding that will inform strategic decisions in the crucial battles that lie ahead. As Rey departs the Supremacy, leaving behind the broken body of an ancient evil and the transformed figure of someone she had hoped to save, she carries with her hard-won wisdom about the nature of power and the cost of the choices that define individual destiny. The battle in the throne room has changed her understanding of the Force and her own role in the galaxy's future, preparing her for the responsibilities that await her as the conflict between freedom and tyranny continues to unfold across the stars. On the mineral planet of Crate, where crystalline formations rise from plains of red salt like monuments to geological processes that span eons, the Resistance faces what appears to be its final battle against the overwhelming might of the First Order. The abandoned rebel base that once served as sanctuary during the darkest days of the Galactic Civil War now provides refuge for the remnants of the galaxy's last hope for freedom, its underground chambers offering temporary protection against the massive military force that surrounds them like a closing fist. The planet's unique geography creates a landscape that seems designed for dramatic confrontation, with the contrast between the white salt surface and the red mineral beneath creating visual metaphors for the conflict between purity and violence that defines the larger war. Crystal foxes native to the world move across the plains like living jewels, their transparent forms reflecting the light of distant stars, while their presence serves as a reminder that beauty and life persist even in the harshest environments. General Leia Organa coordinates the defense from the base's command center, her years of military experience enabling her to extract maximum effectiveness from resources that seem pitifully inadequate against the force arrayed outside. The holographic displays that surround her show the tactical situation with brutal clarity. A few dozen Resistance fighters trapped underground, while hundreds of First Order vehicles prepare to crush them with overwhelming firepower. Her calm demeanor in the face of impossible odds inspires her followers while masking the desperation that threatens to overwhelm her strategic thinking. The First Order assault force that surrounds the base represents the full deployment of their most advanced military technology, with ATM-6 walkers that dwarf their Imperial predecessors and artillery pieces capable of reducing mountains to rubble. The crimson-painted vehicles create a stark contrast against Crate's white surface, their aggressive appearance reflecting the organization's philosophy of intimidation through superior force. The methodical advance of these mechanical giants speaks to the First Order's confidence in their inevitable victory. Finn's desperate plan to sacrifice himself by flying a ramshackle speeder directly into the First Order's siege cannon reflects his complete transformation from programmed stormtrooper to someone willing to die for others' freedom. The rusted mining vehicles that the Resistance uses in their desperate charge cannot match the enemy's advanced technology, but their pilots' determination compensates for mechanical disadvantages through sheer courage and innovative tactics. The doomed attack represents the kind of hopeless heroism that has always characterized Resistance movements facing overwhelming oppression. Rose Tico's intervention that saves Finn's life while destroying his chance at martyrdom carries profound implications for the Resistance's philosophy and approach to the conflict with the First Order. Her declaration that victory comes from saving what you love rather than destroying what you hate provides alternative perspective on heroism and sacrifice that challenges traditional military thinking. The collision that ends both their attack runs creates a moment of intimacy and connection amid the chaos of battle. The massive siege cannon that the First Order employs against the Resistance base represents engineering achievement that surpasses even the Empire's most advanced weapons, a device capable of boring through planetary crust to reach targets that conventional bombardment cannot touch. The weapon's operation creates spectacle of destruction that serves psychological warfare purposes as much as tactical ones, demonstrating to any potential resistors the futility of opposing First Order authority. The red beam that emerges from its barrel carries the promise of absolute annihilation. Luke Skywalker's appearance on the battlefield occurs at the moment when hope seems completely extinguished. His solitary figure walking across Crate's salt plains toward the assembled might of the First Order, creating one of the most iconic images in galactic military history. The Last Jedi's calm demeanor in the face of overwhelming odds reflects not recklessness but complete confidence in the Force and his own connection to the cosmic energy that binds all living things. His presence transforms a hopeless last stand into a moment of transcendent meaning. The confrontation between Luke and Kylo Ren on Crate's crystalline surface represents more than combat between uncle and nephew. It embodies the larger conflict between wisdom and passion, between acceptance and anger that has defined their relationship since Ben's fall to the dark side. Luke's approach to the encounter reflects years of meditation and self-understanding, his tactics designed not to destroy his opponent, but to provide opportunity for redemption and growth. The lightsaber duel that ensues carries emotional weight that transcends mere physical combat. The revelation that Luke's presence on Crate exists as force projection rather than physical manifestation demonstrates mastery of techniques that transcend normal understanding of the Force's limitations. The ability to create such a convincing illusion across interstellar distances while maintaining perfect control over every detail represents achievement that rivals the greatest Jedi Masters in galactic history. The projection serves multiple purposes, providing inspiration for the Resistance while creating tactical opportunity for their escape. The escape of the Resistance survivors through Crate's crystal caves requires them to navigate passages that have been sealed for decades, their route guided by native creatures whose knowledge of the planet's geology exceeds any technical survey. The porgs and crystal foxes that inhabit these underground spaces serve as unlikely allies, their natural instincts leading the fleeing rebels toward exits that might otherwise remain hidden. The journey through crystalline corridors creates moments of beauty amid the desperation of their flight. Rede's arrival on Crate in the Millennium Falcon provides the mechanical means for the Resistance's escape, while symbolizing the passing of heroic legacy from one generation to the next. Her piloting of Han Solo's ship through the crystal caves demonstrates abilities that exceed formal training, her connection to the Force enabling her to navigate passages that would challenge even experienced pilots. The ship's presence offers salvation to those who had resigned themselves to death on Crate's unforgiving surface. Luke's final moments on Arch 2, as his physical form fades into the Force, represent the culmination of his journey from farm boy to Jedi Knight, to hermit, to transcendent being who exists beyond normal limitations of mortality. His peaceful death as twin suns set over the island where he found redemption provides closure to a life defined by struggle against darkness and dedication to protecting the innocent. The binary sunset that witnesses his passing echoes the scene that began his adventure decades earlier on Tatooine. The stable boy on Canto Bight, whose casual use of the Force to retrieve a broom, demonstrates that hope for the galaxy's future extends far beyond the Resistance's organized opposition to First Order rule. His existence proves that Force sensitivity continues to manifest throughout the galaxy, that new generations of potential Jedi are growing up with abilities that could challenge tyranny and oppression. The child's innocent use of power represents hope that transcends military victory or defeat. The legend of Luke Skywalker's final stand spreads across the galaxy through communication networks and personal testimony, inspiring resistance movements on countless worlds to continue fighting despite overwhelming odds. The story of a single Jedi facing down an entire army becomes symbol of defiance that encourages others to stand against oppression regardless of personal cost. The tale grows with each telling, becoming myth that transcends historical accuracy to inspire moral courage. The Resistance's survival, despite their devastating losses on Crate, provides foundation for future opposition to First Order expansion, their escape ensuring that organized resistance will continue even if its form must change to adapt to new circumstances. The knowledge and experience gained through their trials will inform future strategies, while the relationships forged in crisis will sustain them through the challenges ahead. Their unity represents hope that the galaxy's democratic traditions can survive authoritarian assault. The Force-sensitive children throughout the galaxy, who sense Luke's final sacrifice, represent seeds of future hope, potential Jedi who might someday restore balance to the Force and challenge the dark side's growing influence. Their existence suggests that the battle between light and darkness will continue beyond the current conflict, that each generation must find its own way to confront the eternal struggle between freedom and oppression. The children carry within them the potential to surpass their predecessors' achievements. The crystal formation that preserves the image of Luke's confrontation with the First Order serves as permanent monument to the power of moral courage over military might, a reminder that individual acts of heroism can inspire hope even in the darkest circumstances. The crystalline record of his final stand will inspire future visitors to Crate, providing tangible evidence that legends can become reality when circumstances demand extraordinary sacrifice. The monument speaks to the enduring power of hope over despair. As the surviving members of the Resistance escape into hyperspace aboard the Millennium Falcon, they carry with them more than just their lives and the knowledge gained through bitter experience. They possess something far more valuable, the certainty that their cause is just and that their sacrifice has meaning beyond immediate tactical considerations. The spark of hope that survives Crate's battle will ignite fires of resistance throughout the galaxy, ensuring that the First Order's victory remains incomplete despite their overwhelming military advantages. In the hidden depths of the unknown regions, on the ancient Sith world of Exegol, where darkness has festered for millennia like a wound in the fabric of reality itself, Emperor Palpatine's voice echoes through cathedral-sized chambers carved from living rock by slaves whose bones have long since turned to dust. The revelation that the galaxy's greatest enemy has survived his apparent death at Endor transforms every assumption about the conflicts that have raged since the Empire's fall, revealing that the First Order was merely the latest instrument in a plan that spans generations and encompasses the complete domination of all life in the galaxy. The discovery of Palpatine's survival begins with intercepted transmissions that carry the distinctive vocal patterns of the former Emperor, his voice broadcasting across First Order communication networks with promises of ultimate power and threats of annihilation for those who dare oppose his return. The messages reach ears throughout the galaxy, creating panic among those who remember his reign and confusion among younger generations who believed the Sith to be extinct. The very existence of these communications forces a complete re-evaluation of recent galactic history and the true nature of the threats facing civilization. Exegol itself represents the culmination of Sith architectural philosophy, a world transformed into a massive temple complex where the dark side of the Force concentrates with such intensity that sensitive individuals can perceive its malevolent presence from systems away. The planet's surface features massive stone structures that dwarf even the greatest monuments of the Old Republic, their design incorporating geometric patterns that channel and amplify dark side energies in ways that traditional Jedi teachings cannot adequately explain. The atmosphere itself seems to pulse with malevolent power, creating an environment where the normal laws of physics bend to accommodate supernatural forces. The Sith eternal cult that has maintained Exegol through the centuries represents devotion to dark side philosophy that transcends normal concepts of religious dedication, their members having undergone transformations that strip away individual identity in favor of collective service to their ancient master. These beings, neither fully alive nor completely dead, exist in states of suspended animation that allow them to serve purposes that span multiple lifetimes. Their chanting fills the temple chambers with sounds that predate recorded history, invocations in languages that were ancient when the first Jedi discovered the Force. The massive fleet of star destroyers that fills Exegol's underground chambers represents military might that exceeds anything the galaxy has previously encountered, each vessel equipped with planet-killing weapons that make the Death Star's superlaser seem primitive by comparison. The Final Order fleet that Palpatine has assembled during his decades of hidden existence possesses the capability to destroy entire star systems simultaneously, creating the potential for genocide on a scale that could depopulate the galaxy within days. The ship's construction required resources harvested from countless worlds, their crews drawn from populations that disappeared without trace during the supposed peace that followed Endor. Rey's journey to discover her true heritage leads her through revelations that challenge every assumption about her origins and destiny, the truth about her grandfather's identity forcing her to confront the possibility that her extraordinary abilities stem from the very source of galactic evil. The connection between the Palpatine and Skywalker bloodlines creates a symmetry that transcends coincidence, suggesting that the Force itself has orchestrated events to bring these two lineages into conflict across multiple generations. Her struggle with this knowledge reflects the broader theme of choice versus destiny that has defined the saga from its beginning. The training that Rey undergoes with Leia Organa on the jungle world of Ajan Kloss represents the passing of wisdom from one generation of female leaders to the next. Their sessions combining practical instruction in Force techniques with philosophical discussions about the nature of power and responsibility. Leia's own journey from princess to general to Jedi teacher provides context for Rey's development, demonstrating that heroism takes many forms and that the greatest victories often require personal sacrifice rather than military triumph. The lightsaber that Rey constructs during this period represents her evolution from scavenger to Jedi Knight. The search for the Sith wayfinders that will lead to Exegol takes the heroes through locations that resonate with dark side history, ancient temples and forgotten ruins, where previous generations of Sith Lords conducted rituals that still echo through the Force. Each site visited during this quest provides insights into the scope of Palpatine's plans and the resources he has accumulated during his years of hidden existence. The Wayfinders themselves represent technology that combines mechanical precision with supernatural guidance, devices that can navigate the treacherous hyperspace routes that protect Exegol from casual discovery. The revelation of Ben Solo's internal struggle and his gradual turn toward redemption occurs through encounters with Rey that transcend their physical separation, their Force connection, allowing them to share experiences and emotions that bridge the gap between light and darkness. The memory of his father's forgiveness, preserved in his consciousness despite years of dark side conditioning, provides the emotional foundation necessary for his transformation back into the person he was meant to be. His decision to help Rey represents not just personal redemption, but hope that the cycle of darkness that has plagued his family can finally be broken. The assault on Exegol requires coordination between the Resistance fleet and a galaxy-wide uprising that demonstrates the power of hope to inspire collective action against overwhelming odds. The citizens of countless worlds, inspired by the legend of Luke Skywalker's sacrifice and the promise of freedom from tyranny, contribute ships and personnel to create a force that matches the Final Order's numerical superiority through sheer determination and moral purpose. The battle becomes a referendum on the galaxy's future, with ordinary beings choosing to risk everything for the chance to live in freedom. The space battle that erupts around Exegol represents the largest military engagement in galactic history, with thousands of ships from across the galaxy converging to prevent Palpatine's fleet from launching their campaign of total destruction. The combat combines traditional naval tactics with innovations born from desperation as civilian vessels modified for war face off against purpose-built instruments of annihilation. The courage displayed by non-military personnel who volunteer for what they know may be a suicide mission demonstrates the power of collective resistance against authoritarian oppression. Rey's confrontation with Emperor Palpatine in the depths of his Sith temple represents the culmination of a conflict that spans multiple generations, her power as the last Jedi facing off against the accumulated malevolence of the Sith tradition. The Emperor's physical form, sustained through dark side techniques that violate natural law, serves as testament to the corrupting influence of unlimited power and the price paid by those who seek to transcend mortality through evil means. The lightning that fills the chamber during their battle carries the energy of hatred and anger accumulated over millennia. The sacrifice that Rey makes to defeat Palpatine permanently reflects the Jedi principle that the greatest victory often requires the ultimate personal cost, her willingness to give her life to save the galaxy, demonstrating the kind of selfless heroism that has always defined the light side of the Force. Her connection to the spirits of past Jedi provides strength that transcends individual limitations, allowing her to channel the accumulated wisdom and power of generations of Force users who faced similar trials. The voices of the Jedi past speak through her actions, their legacy preserved through her courage. Ben Solo's redemption through love and sacrifice completes his transformation from fallen Jedi to redeemed hero. His decision to save Rey's life at the cost of his own demonstrating that the light side's influence can overcome even the deepest corruption. The act of healing that transfers his life force to Rey represents the ultimate expression of the love that his parents never stopped feeling for him, their faith in his essential goodness finally justified through his choice to embrace the light. His death as Ben Solo rather than Kylo Ren provides closure to a story of fall and redemption that has defined the sequel trilogy. The destruction of the Final Order fleet through the combined efforts of the galaxy's diverse populations creates a victory that belongs not to any single organization or military force, but to the collective will of beings who refuse to accept tyranny as their destiny. The explosions that light up Exegol's sky represent more than military triumph. They symbolize the triumph of hope over despair, of love over hate, of freedom over oppression. The ancient Sith stronghold becomes a tomb for the dark side philosophy that has plagued the galaxy for millennia. Rey's resurrection through Ben Solo's sacrifice and their moment of connection before his death provides resolution to the romantic tension that has developed between them throughout their shared trials, their love transcending the boundaries between light and dark, Jedi and Sith, enemy and ally. The kiss they share represents not just personal fulfillment, but symbolic unity between bloodlines that have been divided by conflict for generations. Their connection demonstrates that love can bridge any divide when it is genuine and selfless. The celebration that erupts across the galaxy as news of the Final Order's defeat spreads through communication networks represents the joy of populations who have lived under the shadow of authoritarian oppression for their entire lives, their relief at finally being free to determine their own destinies without fear of annihilation. The fireworks and festivals that mark the victory serve as testament to the resilience of the galactic civilization and the power of hope to sustain resistance through even the darkest periods. The sounds of celebration echo from core worlds to the outer rim, uniting diverse species in shared joy. As the immediate crisis passes and the galaxy begins the process of rebuilding democratic institutions and healing the wounds inflicted by decades of conflict, the legacy of the Skywalker saga continues through Rey's adoption of the family name and her commitment to training a new generation of Jedi. The lightsabers that she buries on Tatooine serve as monuments to the heroes who sacrificed everything for freedom, their burial in the sand, where Luke's journey began, providing symbolic closure to a story that has defined galactic history for generations. The twin suns that witness this ceremony promise hope for a future where the lessons learned through suffering will guide the galaxy toward lasting peace. As the twin suns of Tatooine begin their descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert landscape where the Skywalker saga began so many years ago, Rey stands at the edge of the moisture farm, where Luke once dreamed of adventure beyond the endless dunes. The lightsabers that she carries, one that belonged to Anakin and Luke Skywalker, the other crafted by Leia Organa during her own journey toward understanding the Force, represent more than mere weapons. They embody the legacy of a family that sacrificed everything to ensure that freedom would triumph over tyranny across the galaxy. The binary sunset that illuminates this solemn ceremony echoes the scene that launched Luke Skywalker's transformation from farm boy to galactic hero. The circular nature of this moment, providing closure to a story that has spanned generations and touched the lives of countless beings throughout the known systems. The Force flows through this place with particular strength, as if the cosmic energy itself recognizes the significance of returning these symbols of hope to the world where their bearer first learned to trust in something greater than himself. Rey's decision to take the Skywalker name represents more than simple adoption of an identity. It signifies her acceptance of the responsibility to carry forward the values and principles that defined Luke and Leia's approach to using the Force in service of others. The name connects her not just to their biological legacy, but to their moral heritage, the commitment to protecting the innocent and standing against darkness that cost them so much but ultimately preserved the galaxy's freedom. Her choice transforms her from the last of the Jedi into the first of a new generation. The galaxy that Rey will help to rebuild reflects the hard-won wisdom gained through decades of conflict. Its new institutions designed to prevent the concentration of power that enabled both the Empire and the First Order to threaten galactic civilization. The lessons learned through suffering have taught the galaxy's diverse populations that eternal vigilance is the price of freedom, that democratic institutions must be actively defended rather than simply taken for granted. The peace that settles over the systems carries the weight of understanding rather than the innocence of ignorance. The burial of the lightsabers in Tatooine's sand serves multiple symbolic purposes, returning these instruments of justice to the world that shaped their most famous wielder, while ensuring that they will not become objects of veneration that might distract from the principles they represent. The ceremony acknowledges that the age of the Jedi as galactic guardians has ended, replaced by a new understanding that the Force belongs to all beings rather than to any single organization or tradition. The weapons rest in peace, their work complete. The children throughout the galaxy who possess Force sensitivity represent the future of the Jedi tradition, but their training will reflect lessons learned from previous generations' mistakes and successes. Rey's approach to identifying and nurturing Force-sensitive individuals emphasizes balance and choice rather than the rigid dogma that contributed to the old Jedi Order's downfall. The new Jedi will be encouraged to form relationships and emotional connections, to understand that love strengthens rather than weakens their connection to the Force. The governments that emerge from the First Order's collapse incorporate democratic principles tempered by realistic assessment of the threats that authoritarian movements pose to free societies. The New Republic's failures provide cautionary examples of how complacency and demilitarization can leave democratic institutions vulnerable to organized enemies who exploit peace for their own advantage. The new galactic government maintains sufficient military strength to deter aggression while preserving the civil liberties that make freedom meaningful. The memorial services held on countless worlds honor not just the heroes whose names are recorded in official histories, but the ordinary beings who chose to resist tyranny despite overwhelming odds and personal risk. These ceremonies celebrate the courage of stormtroopers who broke their conditioning, civilians who sheltered refugees, and workers who sabotaged First Order operations at the cost of their own safety. The recognition extends to families who lost loved ones to the conflict, acknowledging that victory's price was paid by entire communities rather than just military personnel. The economic reconstruction that follows the war's end focuses on rebuilding systems that were stripped of resources to fuel the First Order's military machine, with particular attention to worlds that suffered under Imperial and First Order occupation. The galaxy's productive capacity, freed from the demands of constant warfare, can finally be directed toward improving living conditions and expanding opportunities for all sentient beings. Trade routes that were disrupted by conflict gradually reopen, connecting isolated systems to the broader galactic community. The cultural renaissance that emerges from the conflict's resolution reflects the diversity that authoritarian regimes had sought to suppress, with artistic expressions flourishing as beings feel free to explore themes and ideas that were previously forbidden. Literature, music, and visual arts address the war's trauma while celebrating the resilience of the galactic community and the triumph of hope over despair. The stories that emerge from this period will inspire future generations to value freedom and resist oppression. The Force itself seems to flow more freely through the galaxy as the dark side influence that concentrated on Exegol dissipates. Sensitive individuals reporting that meditation and connection to the cosmic energy have become easier and more fulfilling. The balance between light and dark appears to have shifted toward equilibrium, with the elimination of the Sith allowing natural forces to reassert themselves. This change affects not just Force users, but all living beings who sense a lightening of the spiritual burden that had weighed on the galaxy for decades. Reggie's new Jedi Temple, established on a world that combines natural beauty with strategic significance, serves as both training center and symbol of the Order's commitment to serving rather than ruling galactic civilization. The architecture reflects lessons learned from the destruction of Luke's academy, with defenses designed to protect students while remaining open to the broader community. The curriculum emphasizes practical skills and moral development rather than esoteric knowledge, preparing Jedi to serve as counselors and guardians rather than warriors. The relationships that developed during the war continue to provide emotional support and friendship as the participants adapt to peacetime existence, with veterans of the conflict maintaining connections that transcend species and cultural boundaries. Finn's work to help other former stormtroopers adapt to life outside the First Order demonstrates the power of shared experience to heal trauma and build community. Poe Dameron's transition from military commander to civilian leader reflects the challenge of applying wartime skills to peaceful pursuits. The monuments erected throughout the galaxy to commemorate the war's end emphasize themes of unity and redemption rather than military triumph, recognizing that victory was achieved through cooperation between diverse populations rather than the actions of any single group. These memorials serve as reminders that freedom requires constant vigilance and that the cost of complacency can be measured in entire civilizations. The inscriptions speak of hope, sacrifice, and the enduring power of love to overcome hatred. The archives that preserve the war's history include testimonies from participants at every level, from galactic leaders to ordinary citizens, ensuring that future generations will understand both the price of freedom and the methods used to achieve it. These records serve as educational resources that will help prevent the repetition of mistakes that enabled authoritarianism to threaten galactic civilization. The stories emphasize individual choice and moral courage as the foundations of resistance to oppression. The agricultural worlds that begin producing food surpluses for the first time in decades reflect the peace dividend that comes from ending the resource drain of constant warfare, their harvests feeding populations that had known hunger under Imperial and First Order rule. The restoration of ecological balance on planets that were strip-mined for military purposes demonstrates the galaxy's commitment to healing the wounds inflicted by generations of conflict. The green shoots that emerge from poisoned soil symbolize hope for renewal. The communication networks that connect isolated systems to the galactic community carry news of reconstruction and celebration, their transmissions spreading stories of recovery and hope rather than the propaganda and threats that characterized the war years. The free flow of information enables democratic participation and cultural exchange, creating connections between beings who had been isolated by authoritarian control. The networks themselves represent triumph over the censorship and manipulation that enabled tyrannical regimes to maintain power through deception. As night falls over Tatooine and the ceremony concludes, Rey feels the presence of Luke and Leia through the Force, their spirits offering approval and guidance as she prepares to face the challenges of rebuilding the galaxy. The connection transcends death, demonstrating that love and sacrifice create bonds that endure beyond physical existence. Their wisdom will guide her as she works to ensure that the peace they died to achieve will endure for generations to come. The stars that emerge in Tatooine's desert sky reflect the lights of countless worlds where beings sleep peacefully for the first time in decades, their dreams no longer haunted by the fear of annihilation or oppression. The galaxy rests in the knowledge that its greatest threats have been defeated and that the future holds promise rather than dread. The cosmic silence carries hope across the void, whispering of possibilities that seemed impossible during the darkest hours of the war. And so the story concludes where it began, in the desert wastes of a remote world where the Force first called to a young farm boy and set in motion events that would reshape galactic civilization. The circle is complete, the balance restored, and the galaxy free to determine its own destiny. The war is over, the heroes have found their peace, and the future stretches ahead like an infinite ocean of stars, each one representing a world where beings can live in freedom because others were willing to sacrifice everything to make that freedom possible.